A vast mountain range stretches under a heavy, clouded sky. Below, a massive army marches through the valley, their golden armor glinting under dragon banners. Row after row of spearmen move in perfect unison, kicking up thick clouds of dust. The legion heads toward a colossal stone fortress that towers over the landscape. Perched high above on his throne, Wijichin watches the display with a cold, bored expression. He lets out a sharp grin, clearly satisfied with the power at his command. His loyal subordinate, the left emissary of light, approaches across the wide stone platform. The man shouts with fanatical devotion, praising how the cult's prestige has reached the heavens. Wijichin accepts the flattery casually, looking every bit the absolute ruler. The subordinate hesitates, admitting there's one thing he's genuinely curious about. He points a trembling finger toward the massive force assembled below the balcony. He's focused on the soldiers' equipment, specifically how incredibly expensive it all looks. Knowing the cult's finances have been dry for years, he asks where the money for all this came from. Wijichin just takes a calm sip of tea and says someone was kind enough to lend it to him. The subordinate nearly chokes, his eyes bulging in total disbelief. His lord repeats it like a minor detail. There was a guy willing to give them a loan. The emissary can't wrap his head around anyone being crazy enough to lend to the demonic cult. To him, it makes zero sense. It's obvious they'd never actually pay it back. Suddenly, a new realization hits him, and his expression shifts from shock to awe. He claps his hands together, convinced he's figured out his lord's brilliant strategy. He falls into a deep bow, shouting that Wijichin truly is the legendary heavenly demon. He assumes the banks must have been so terrified that they just handed over the gold voluntarily. He laughs, marveling at the genius of bleeding the enemy dry without needing to spill blood. But internally, he's still wondering what kind of lunatic would actually sign off on that deal. Wijichin scoffs, telling him he's not some common thug who just steals whatever he wants. He reaches into his robes, rummaging around for a moment. He pulls out a piece of paper, explaining that he simply used his thumbprint to get the money. He holds up the document, mentioning the lender was a very polite fellow named Manager Kim. The subordinate takes the paper, stunned that someone would lend a fortune based on just one contract. His eyes lock onto a specific section titled Special Conditions. His pupil shrinks in terror as he reads the fine print. The clause specifies exactly what the penalty is for failing to repay the debt. It states the debtor's internal energy shall be seized, leaving the subordinate completely speechless. His jaw drops even further when he realizes the repayment date is set for today. Wijichin stays silent, letting his subordinate stew in his own panic. The emissary yells about how arrogant the contract is, but quickly tries to dismiss it as a formality. He reasons that since his lord will soon conquer everything, all the gold will be theirs anyway. He lets out a nervous laugh, insisting that the repayment date doesn't mean a thing. Wijichin tucks the paper away, agreeing that he'll just toss Manager Kim some gold after winning. The subordinate shouts praises once more, calling his lord the true heaven above heavens. Wijichin lets out a booming laugh, his confidence reaching a fever pitch. He reaches for his weapon, drawing his sword to officially signal the start of the conquest. Wijichin stands tall, raising his sword to the sky with absolute authority. The blade glints as he declares himself the master of heaven. With a cold, ruthless gaze, he gives the command to plunder and burn the central plains. He points the way forward, ordering his massive army to march. The commanders below clash their hands together in a respectful salute. A sea of hooded cultists answers in unison, ready to follow his command to the death. As the army moves out, a massive cloud of dust kicks up behind them. The soldiers erupt into a roar of war fervor, their gold armor glinting as they charge. Every man is shouting, filled with the excitement of the coming invasion. From the balcony, Wijichin watches as his legions fill the valley floor. Thousands of boots thunder against the dry earth, sending grit into the air. Banners wave over the charging sea of steel as the cult begins its conquest. Wijichin stands alone on the high platform, looking down at the power he's unleashed. He lets out a satisfied huff, proud of the force he's assembled. Confident in his victory, he heads back to his throne to relax. He takes a long, slow sip of his tea, enjoying the quiet after the storm of orders. Closing his eyes, he lets out a deep breath of satisfaction. He leans back in the chair, feeling like he's finally on top of the world. But then a cheerful voice chirps right behind him, causing him to spit his tea out in a comical spray. He jumps to his feet, spinning around to find two strangers standing right there in his private sanctuary. This is Manager Kim, a tall, lanky man in simple black robes with a permanent, closed-eye smile and a long red ribbon in his hair. Standing beside him is his assistant, a slim woman with long dark hair, emerald green eyes, and a large wooden abacus. The two of them look perfectly professional, standing there without giving off even a hint of presence. Wijichin starts sweating as he realizes this smiling man is the one who lent him the money. His crimson eyes tremble, a wave of genuine shock washing over him. The legendary heavenly demon is left completely speechless by their sudden appearance. He can't believe he didn't sense them approaching at all. For a man widely considered to be the strongest in the world, this is a terrifying realization. Wijichin is supposed to have senses so sharp he could hear a single leaf fall in the mountains, yet he was caught totally off guard. Manager Kim bows with a wide, toothy grin and introduces himself as a representative of the Continental Bank. He reminds Wijichin of the day they first met to sign the loan agreement. Even with the man's incredibly polite greeting, the atmosphere feels suffocating. Wijichin's instincts as a martial master start screaming in his head. Sweat rolls down his face as he realizes just how dangerous this smiling man really is. Every part of his being is telling him that he's in serious trouble. Narrowing his eyes, he demands to know what these people actually are. Manager Kim just keeps that creepy, cheerful expression, acting like he's just there for a routine visit. He reaches into his robes and pulls out a thick, official-looking ledger. With a terrifyingly friendly laugh, he reminds his valued customer that the loan is due today. The assistant adjusts her glasses, her emerald eyes looking cold and clinical. She stands ready with the ledger open, her fingers poised over a long abacus. Without a word, her hands become a blur as she starts calculating the total debt. The unnamed assistant's finger snaps against the wooden beads of her abacus with a sharp click. She peers over the rims of her round glasses, her eyes fixed on the numbers in the ledger. Manager Kim and the assistant huddle together, whispering over their calculations while Wijichin looks on in sweating confusion. With a jovial laugh, Manager Kim announces that the principal of 6,000 nyang has ballooned with 7,000 in interest. Wijichin's face contorts in pure shock, his eyes going blank at the mention of 13,000 nyang. He bellows in protest, unable to comprehend how the interest could possibly be higher than the principal. Manager Kim maintains a sharp, predatory grin, reminding his valued customer that private loans are never cheap. His eyes glint from the shadows as he notes that low interest is only for those who qualify for institutional banks. He lists Wijichin's failings, a bottom-tier credit rating and absolutely zero collateral. Manager Kim points out that as the head of a violent syndicate, Wijichin wouldn't pass even a basic loan screening. Veins bulge on Wijichin's forehead as he screams that his organization is a divine cult, not a common syndicate. Manager Kim dismisses the claim with a wide, mocking smile, nodding that to the rest of the world, they're just dangerous cultists. He explains that because they are a high-risk group liable to be dismantled at any moment, no one else would dare lend to them. Wijichin stands frozen in a cold sweat, realizing that every single word the man says is the cold, hard truth. In his mind, he sees the silhouette of his cult, knowing that any bank that supported them would be crushed by the orthodox factions. The unnamed assistant's finger swipes across the contract with clinical precision. She explains that the staggering interest rate is simply a hazard pay premium for the risk they've taken. She holds the document out for him to see, pointing directly to the specific clause that seals his fate. Wijichin's teeth grind together as he stares at his own signature, the weight of the contract finally sinking in. He lets out a heavy, defeated sigh, his shoulders slumped as he faces his financial reality. He finally admits that he doesn't have the money on him right now, looking at manager Kim with a flicker of desperation. Raising a finger, he attempts to pivot the conversation toward a new proposal. He gestures grandly toward the sunlit mountain ranges, calling for the creditors to look at the landscape. He points out the rich, fertile lands of the Central Plains waiting to be taken. Manager Kim and the assistant look out over the balcony, though Manager Kim dryly notes the fine dust in the air. Ignoring the sarcasm, Wijichin declares that he is about to march down and conquer everything in his sight. He claims that robbing the Murim Alliance's storehouses will make his current debt look like pocket change. He leans in, pleading for just one more month to settle the account. In his desperation, he promises to pay back double the principal, no, triple the amount. He stands tall, staking his very name as the heavenly demon on this new, grand promise. It is an unprecedented offer, a massive return on investment if his conquest succeeds. But Manager Kim's smile turns cold and sharp as he prepares to deliver his final answer. He laughs cheerfully, stating that their bank simply does not invest in uncertain future value. He points out that statistically, the probability of a successful war of conquest is less than 5%. A single, firm footstep echoes across the stone balcony as Manager Kim moves closer. He declares the proposal rejected, nodding that the agreed-upon time for payment has already passed. A menacing, shadowed grin spreads across Manager Kim's face as he moves to enforce the terms of the contract. Manager Kim drops a bombshell. Since the guy can't pay, he's gotta pay with his body. Wijichin isn't taking that very well. He just lets out a dry laugh. To the heavenly demon, being talked to like this by a mere commoner is the ultimate insult. The wind picks up, whipping the flags around as the tension builds. Manhwa senses something's about to go down. She looks on, bracing for the impact. The very air begins to vibrate. Dark clouds start swirling above. The sky turns pitch black as demonic energy gathers. Manhwa's eyes go wide at the sheer scale of it. The stone tiles beneath the demon's feet start to crumble. Wiji stands there, practically radiating raw power. He declares himself the absolute master of the demonic path. He mocks the idea of a lone shark trying to claim him. He was going to be nice and just give them some gold, but now he's choosing violence. A massive explosion of purple chi erupts from him. Manager Kim starts trembling, tears streaming down his face. He's literally wailing. Woody sees the tears and assumes he's terrified. He tells the collector it's way too late for regrets. But Kim isn't scared. He's heartbroken that all that energy is being wasted. Wiji's just confused at this point. Kim screams at him for damaging collateral without permission. Wiji clenches his fist, purple energy leaking everywhere. He's absolutely done with this crazy guy's talk. He swings his blade, releasing a massive wave of light. The whole platform shudders from the force of the strike. Wiji wants to tear him to shreds. He calls out his ultimate move, Black Knight Demise Slash. A line of pure destruction rips across the stone. The energy beam is blinding as it surges forward. Manager Kim just stands there, watching the world get deleted. He doesn't even flinch. With a mere wave of his hand, Kim made the sword slash miss him and continue tearing through everything for miles. In the distance, a mountain peak gets sliced clean off. It's a terrifying display of power that leaves everything in ruins. Manhwa's jaw hits the floor. She can't believe a deflected strike did that much damage. Wiji laughs, proud of his handiwork. He admits the collector actually had something to back up his arrogance. Kim just calls it a trivial trick that's only going to get him killed faster. Wiji clenches his sword, purple energy leaking from the hilt like liquid shadow. He pours everything into one final outburst of power. He screams for the collector to take it, certain that Kim's pathetic tricks are about to fail. Manager Kim just smiles back, completely unfazed by the terrifying aura. Suddenly, the demon's face drains of color as he feels something change. He's sweating bullets, realizing he might have miscalculated big time. Before he can even blink, Kim has a hand pressed firmly against his chest. It's a move that defies all logic. The strongest man in the world just got touched by a nobody. Wiji is reeling, unable to comprehend how he missed the man's movements. With a polite, creepy grin, Kim announces it's time to start the debt collection. He leans in close, whispering that this might sting just a little bit. Wiji's pupils shrink to pinpricks as pure terror sets in. Golden energy surges through Kim's hand, piercing right into the demon's core. The pain is blinding, like having his internal organs ripped out one by one. He realizes with horror that his energy is being forcefully sucked away. A massive vortex of power forms as a lifetime of martial mastery is drained in seconds. Kim stays perfectly calm, even telling his valued customer to relax through the pain. Wiji screams in agony, thinking about the decades of hellish training he's losing. But Kim is in a good mood, feeling extra generous today. He even offers to clear out the impure chi as a complimentary service. The legendary heavenly demon is reduced to a blubbering mess of snot and tears. The energy keeps pouring out, lighting up the entire mountain summit. Finally, Wiji's legs give out, and he collapses toward the stone floor. He hits the ground hard, his spirit completely broken. His eyes go blank, staring into nothing as the last of his power vanishes. Kim gives a polite bow, thanking him for the hard work and declaring the job finished. He stands beside Manhwa and formally introduces them as the Continental Bank staff. With a cheerful wink, he tells Wiji to be sure and use their services again. Wiji just stares at the business card, his face a hollow mask of despair. He tries to force out one last word through the shock. But he just slumps over, face planting into the dirt while calling them bastards. The business card flutters in the wind, landing right next to the fallen master. It's just a simple card for manager Kim, looking completely out of place on a battlefield. 3 days later, life in the rest of the world seems to go on as usual. Over at the Hobin restaurant in Sichuan, the place is packed with hungry travelers. The tables are loaded with steaming food and jars of fine wine. But the atmosphere is thick with gossip about the war. Word on the street is that the demonic cult's invasion has suddenly ground to a halt. The news has everyone at the table leaning in, unable to believe the rumors. They start wondering if the invincible Wiji-chan actually got cold feet. Goatee Man 1 tells them to shut up before they say something stupid. He reminds them that a decade ago, Wiji slaughtered 100 masters all by himself. A bloody flashback shows the piles of bodies Wiji-chan left in his wake, cementing his reputation as a monster among monsters. Back in the restaurant, a patron scoffs that the demonic cult's sudden stop is just a trap meant to lower everyone's guard. Another man wonders if the demon has finally achieved enlightenment and is preparing to ascend right in the middle of a battlefield. His friend tells him to stop talking nonsense, reminding him of the cult's unstoppable momentum. To the rest of the world, the halt is utterly incomprehensible. No government forces or faction alliances had been able to stand in their way. Yet for absolutely no reason at all, the massive army simply stopped their march. One man whispers a theory about the great demon suffering from a sudden chi deviation. He shakes his head, finding it hard to believe such a powerful master would fall so easily. The restaurant is alive with chatter, as everyone tries to imagine some grandiose, tragic explanation. They are convinced a massive conspiracy, destined to go down in history, is at play. Goatee Man 1 takes a sip of his wine, his brow furrowed as he offers a different thought. He asks if they just ran out of travel funds, since moving such a massive army requires a literal fortune. A sudden, heavy silence falls over the entire dining hall. The silence is broken by a roar of laughter from the other patrons. One man calls his friend an idiot, reminding him that the cult has mountains of gold and silver. The man who made the suggestion just shrugs, nodding that it's tough for anyone to get by without money. His friends keep laughing, joking that it's as likely as the demon swearing off killing because of a fish in the Yellow River. From a nearby table, someone lets out a thoughtful hum. Manager Kim smiles to himself, agreeing that the man actually has a point. He sits across from Manhwa, looking quite pleased with the rowdy atmosphere. Manhwa muses that money doesn't discriminate, whether you're a human, a ghost, or even the lord of the demonic cult. A waiter comes to their table, asking if they're ready to order their fresh daily specials. Manhwa excitedly checks the menu, reminding the manager of his promise of a feast after their long trek. Manager Kim looks at her with a flat, unimpressed gaze. He reminds her that company expenses aren't a personal allowance, especially since their last payment was in energy, not cash. He points out that they are technically in the red at the moment. To her dismay, he cheerfully orders 2 bowls of their cheapest plain noodles. 2 steaming but incredibly simple bowls of noodles are set before them. Manhwa curses him as a cheapskate, but Kim just keeps eating, refuting her claims about hair loss. While slurping her noodles, she asks where their next target, or sucker, is located. Kim corrects her, calling them precious customers, and asks if she knows where this one lives. A predatory, calculating smile spreads across Manager Kim's face. Their next stop is the legendary Mount Hua. A brilliant full moon illuminates the night sky over Shanxi province. Hualien County sits quiet and peaceful in the moon's glow. The streets are still bustling with night life and lanterns. A single, determined footstep lands on the road. Manager Kim and Manhwa have arrived at the gates of a prestigious sect. He looks up at the building, calling it their precious workplace for the night. 2 guards at the gate quickly block the path, shouting for the strangers to halt. The scarred guard blocks the entrance, demanding to know what business a young couple has at a rundown pavilion this late at night. Manhwa is immediately suspicious, wondering why such a shabby place would even need guards. The 2 groups face off in the dark outside the isolated building. Manager Kim politely asks to head inside, but the guard isn't budging without an entry token. With a calm smile, Kim admits they don't have a token or anything like it. The scarred guard's eye twitches, his patience clearly reaching its limit. He starts to draw his sword, ready to end the conversation with force. He warns them to get lost before things get bloody, showing his teeth. Kim just exhales a little sigh, completely unbothered by the threat. He steps forward, nodding that the guard looks like he's actually taken a few lives before. The mood shifts as Kim decides it's time to teach these guys a lesson. The guard lunges, shouting that Kim won't even have time to cry before he's in a coffin. He leaps high into the air, bringing his blade down in a heavy vertical strike. Kim doesn't even move from his spot, just reaching up with one hand. He catches the very tip of the sword between 2 fingers, stopping the full-force attack instantly. The guard's eyes go wide as he realizes his weapon is stuck. With a quick strike to the arm, Kim neutralizes the guard's ability to hold his sword. The man collapses into the dirt, screaming in pain as Kim stands over him. Guard B watches his partner fall, completely stunned by the sheer speed of it. Driven by desperation, the second guard charges in, screaming insults. He unleashes the Poison Fang Flash, a green-tinged blade technique aimed straight for the head. Kim doesn't drop his smile, just casually raising 2 fingers again. The sword shatters on impact, sending shards flying everywhere. Guard B freezes, staring at his broken hilt in disbelief. Kim slips behind him before he can even react. A rapid series of finger strikes land across the guard's back, targeting his meridian points. The guard lets out a guttural scream as his internal energy is violently disrupted. He crumples forward, hitting the ground with a heavy thud. Manhwa watches the aftermath, her expression unreadable. She admits to herself that no matter how much she watches him, she can't wrap her head around his skills. The way he moves doesn't fit the patterns of any orthodox martial arts she's seen. But his style doesn't seem to belong to the unorthodox factions either. She recalls the moment he single-handedly subdued the heavenly demon without a hint of fear. A master of that caliber should be famous all across Murim, but he's a total ghost. She considers just asking him about his true identity once and for all. She looks at him, searching for any telltale sign of who he really is. The words stay stuck in her throat as she hesitates. She figures he wouldn't tell her the truth even if she did ask, so she keeps quiet. Kim turns back to the guards as they lie there groaning in the dirt. Guard B clutches his arm, crying out that he can't feel anything. Rihwa walks up beside Kim, looking down at the two broken men. She asks if they're dead, but Kim explains he just severed their meridians so they can't bully regular people anymore. Manager Kim tells Rihwa to hide the bodies and follow him inside, which doesn't exactly thrill her. She drags the guards away, cursing her terrible boss and his lack of consideration. Kim steps into the dark, quiet interior of the pavilion. He hums to himself, sensing something interesting just beneath the floorboards. Sure enough, he finds a hidden staircase leading deep underground. The passage is dim and stone-walled, perfectly hidden from the surface. Kim descends the stairs, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the narrow space. At the bottom, he finds himself standing in front of a heavy door as muffled noise filters through. He cracks a smile, clearly liking what he sees on the other side. It's a massive, bustling gambling den, filled with people desperate to change their fortunes. Tables are packed with men shouting and slamming down tiles. One gambler is so confident he's willing to bet his own hand on the next turn. His opponent just laughs at the idiocy, wondering how he expects to make any money playing like that. Rihwa finally catches up, looking completely done with the day's tasks. Kim teases her for being sluggish, telling her she really needs to move faster. She ignores the jab, realizing with a start that their workplace for the day is a literal gambling den. Kim simply confirms it with a pleasant, slightly terrifying smile. Rihwa finds the air stuffy and disgusting, but Kim just calls it the pungent smell of money. Suddenly, a roar goes up from the crowd as someone hits another big win. Everyone is amazed. This young guy has won 3 games in a row. Kim points him out, identifying the winner as their target for the day. The young man looks calm as he holds his winning tiles. As he sits there confidently, a specific purple crest on his robe catches the light. It's the plum blossom crest, the symbol of one of the most prestigious sects in the land. Rihwa is shocked. She can't believe their sucker is actually from the Mount Hua sect. She stares at the young man, her brain struggling to reconcile his status with his current location. Kim corrects her, reminding her that they don't use the word sucker in this line of work. To him, he's just a customer, and a very promising one at that. The man is Ching Sang, a direct disciple and the youngest plum blossom swordsman in history. His reputation alone is enough to shake the entire region, but here he is, throwing it all away. Kim notes that while the guy is a customer, his gambling skills are definitely those of a sucker. He tells Rihwa not to twist his words. The man's status doesn't make him any smarter with his bets. Rihwa still finds it hard to believe as she glances at the intelligence report. But looking at the table, Ching Sang's win rate is currently through the roof. Ching Sang looks at his next hand, a small sweat drop forming on his temple. He decides to go big, calling the bet and raising it by 10 nyang with a manic grin. The dealer tells everyone to show their hands as the tension reaches a breaking point. Tiles clatter onto the table as the final results are revealed. The crowd goes wild again. Their junior brother has won yet another round. Ching Sang laughs hysterically, sweeping the mountain of silver coins toward him. Rihwa watches from a distance, nodding how lucky he seems to be. She notes his clumsy hand movements and stiff expression, concluding that he looks like a sucker who's just on a fluke streak. Manager Kim watches the scene with a knowing look, musing about the nature of luck. He asks Rihwa if she knows what the scariest thing at a gambling table is. Rihwa can only offer a confused silence. At the table, Ching Sang's companions are cheering him on, convinced he's about to sweep the entire den. Ching Sang laughs along, feeling invincible as the tiles seem to stick to his hands. Kim pointed at the dealer's calculating smirk, his own smile turning sharp as he prepared to explain. He tells her the scariest thing is exactly what's happening, starting off with a series of fluke wins. Then the dealer let out a soft, dark chuckle, a sinister smile that made Rihwa's skin crawl. Rihwa sweats, realizing that Kim has seen this tragic play unfold 1,000 times before. Kim's words seem to hang in the air like a curse over the gambling table. The tide of the game, which had favored Ching Sang so heavily, begins to take a subtle, nasty turn. An opponent flips his tiles with a triumphant shout, claiming the round. Chung-sang stares in disbelief. He lost by a single solitary point. His fellow disciples try to play it off, reminding him that it was only a small pot anyway. But Kim is watching closer, seeing the gears of desperation start to turn in Chung-sang's head. The pattern repeats. He gives up the small pots, but when the stakes get high, he loses by the narrowest of margins. Chung-sang tries to force another laugh, insisting his luck is still holding up. An opponent gathers a fresh pile of coins, delighting in his streak of good fortune. Then, in another round, the opponent revealed his hand. It was higher by exactly 1 point. It was almost mathematically cruel. In the next round, the opponent flipped the winning tile, his smile mocking Chung-sang's mounting panic. He laughs, saying he almost feels bad for winning by such a tiny margin every single time. Chung-sang grips his tiles so hard his knuckles turn white, his sanity fraying at the edges. Losing by 1 point over, and over is a special kind of torture, designed to make a gambler double down. The constant near misses have completely paralyzed Chung-sang's ability to think rationally. One of his senior brothers suggests they call it a night, sensing that the atmosphere has turned toxic. Chung-sang ignores them, frantically digging through his robes for anything else he can wager. He pulls out several thick strings of silver coins, the last of his wealth. With a desperate roar, he slams the entire pile onto the table. It's all or nothing. The other gamblers gasp. He's betting his entire fortune on a single, shaky hand. Chung-sang looks like a man possessed, his eyes wide and bloodshot as he shouts that his gut is telling him this is the one. When it was all over, his martial brothers looked on in sheer terror, coming to the realization that their junior brother had completely snapped. One of the disciples makes a quick excuse about urgent business and decides to bail before things get even worse. Chung-sang doesn't even notice them leaving. He's a hollow shell staring at a wooden table. Manager Kim stands up, deciding that the customer is finally ready for his services. He looks at Riwa and asks if they should finally get to work. Back at the table, Chung-sang's money sits in a glistening pile, a final sacrifice to the house. He hunches over his bet, his teeth bared in a feral expression of hope and terror. The spectators whisper among themselves, amazed that anyone would be this reckless. Chung-sang screams at his own luck, sweating profusely as he waits for the final tiles to fall. His brothers watch from a distance, pitying the man but unwilling to stop him. The silence of the den is heavy, broken only by the quiet clacking of wood on felt. Manager Kim starts walking toward the table, a shark scenting blood in the water. He adjusts his sleeves and tells Riwa it's time to show the customer what a real debt looks like. Outside the gambling den, a full moon hangs over the jagged peaks, illuminating a night of ruin. Chung-sang sits on the porch, his fingers buried deep in his hair as he reels from his loss. The weight of his failure is crushing, leaving him slumped against the cold stone wall. He mutters to himself in a daze, convinced that he has truly lost his mind to the tiles. Panic sets in as he realizes the consequence. His master will beat him mercilessly if he returns empty-handed. He flinches as a shadow falls over him, sensing a presence he didn't hear approach. Manager Kim stands before him with a wide, eerie grin, greeting him as a valued customer. Kim's voice is smooth and predatory as he lists off the perks of his services. No collateral and instant approval. He introduces himself as a representative of the Continental Bank, here to offer a helping hand. Chung-sang looks up in total confusion, unable to process this sudden offer of salvation. He stammers, trying to make sense of the strange term, Continental Bank. The realization hits him like a punch to the gut. These people are loan sharks. Manager Kim doesn't flinch at the label, his smile never wavering for a second. He tells Chung-sang that he can call them whatever he likes, as long as he understands they have the funds he needs. Chung-sang draws his sword in a desperate show of force, his blade gleaming in the moonlight. He demands to know how they dare offer a loan to a plum-blossom swordsman of the great Mount Hua. Kim simply chuckles, completely unimpressed by the martial artist's posturing. With a swift motion, Kim produces thick bundles of silver coins, the metal clinking seductively. Chung-sang's eyes widen as he stares at the silver, his resolve already beginning to crumble. Kim steps closer, his voice dropping to a whisper as he tells the swordsman that his status means nothing to him. He leans in with a toothy, sinister grin, asking if this isn't exactly what Sang is looking for. He tells the desperate man that he should use this money to win back everything he lost. Sang is shaken to his core by Kim's absolute lack of fear or respect for his sect. He stares at the silver, caught between the honor of his sect and the bottomless pit of his own greed. Sang is at his breaking point, sweating buckets and wishing he just had the cash to fix his mess. Right on cue, manager Kim presents a contract from the Continental Bank, one where full comprehension isn't even required. With a salesman's grin and a heavy string of coins in hand, Kim promises the loan is instant if he just signs on the dotted line. The desperate disciple doesn't need much convincing. He's already sprinting toward the money as Kim mentions the reasonable interest rate. He reaches out, eyes locked on the chance to win back everything he lost. Without a second thought, the Mount Hua prodigy puts brush to paper and signs his life away. He shoves the contract back at Kim, his only focus being the silver coins waiting for him. Greed completely takes over his face as he manically demands the money. Kim keeps that unsettlingly bright smile, confirming the approval is complete. The money is handed over, and Sang doesn't waste a second, bolting right back to the gambling den. Rihwa watches him disappear, disturbed by how the guy didn't even look back. She looks down at the spot where the desperate man was just standing, a cold feeling sinking in. As she picks up the contract, she can't help but ask Kim why a Mount Hua disciple is their latest target. She knows gambling is a vice, but to her, it's not like the guy is a monster on the level of the heavenly demon. Kim just turns it back on her, asking if she really thinks he cares about which faction a person belongs to. He shuts his eyes, dismissing the idea of good or evil sects entirely. To him, they're all just martial artists, and the only thing that counts is if they have something he wants. He makes it clear that the bank's interests are the only priority. Rihwa stays silent, the weight of Kim's cold logic hanging heavy in the air. Manager Kim and Rihwa walk into the courtyard like they own the place. One of the guys from earlier is there, and he looks like he's seen a ghost. He remembers exactly how fast Kim moved when he took them out before. His buddies have to hold him up while he points the two of them out. It wasn't even a fight. Kim just shut down their meridians in an instant. They aren't alone, though. A massive crowd is waiting for them, led by one big, bald dude. The big guy asks if these are the punks he's supposed to deal with. Kim doesn't even look at them, just tells Rihwa she should have cleaned up her mess better. The leader steps forward and introduces himself as Jang Mo of the Viper Gang. Kim keeps it professional, Continental Bank Manager Kim. Jang Mo just laughs. He's never heard of the bank and thinks Kim's moves are third-rate. He tells Kim he's an arrogant brat for acting tough on his turf. Kim just gives him that smug smile. Why should I care? That's all it takes for Jang Mo's eye to start twitching in anger. He gives the order, take one arm and one leg from each of them. The whole gang rushes in, weapons out and ready for blood. One guy leaps through the air, screaming at the top of his lungs. Kim doesn't even break a sweat. He just sidesteps and gives him a little tap. A sharp crack echoed as Kim's leg connected with his. The thug's face instantly transforms from rage to pure agony. He goes down hard, face planting into the dirt. Another guy charges in, calling Kim a bastard. Before he can even swing, Kim is already moving past him. Kim stays perfectly calm while he picks his next targets. He moves like a blur, hitting multiple people with pinpoint accuracy. In a split second, the entire front line is sent flying. The ground is covered in groaning thugs who can't even stand up. Jang Mo just stands there, his jaw practically hitting the floor. He's sweating now, finally realizing he might have messed with the wrong guy. Kim stands there under the full moon, looking like he's just out for a stroll. Jang Mo can't believe it. He took out his entire squad in a single breath. In his eyes, Kim isn't just some bank manager anymore. He looks like a straight-up monster. The boss gulps, his throat bone dry from pure fear. He tries to act tough, telling Kim he's actually pretty good for a kid. He tries to bluff, saying Kim should get on his knees and apologize while he still can. But his wide eyes tell a completely different story. Kim just sighs and lets out a bored phew. Then he closes the distance and delivers a strike that shatters the air. Jang Mo's eyes bulge as he coughs up a spray of blood. The big man hits the ground with a heavy thud. The rest of the gang loses it, crawling away and begging for their lives. Manager Kim gives a chilling smirk, deciding to let things slide just for today. But he leaves them with a warning. If any more gambling dens open up in Hwayan County, things won't end so well. The boss from the Viper gang is left trembling on the ground, realizing just how much trouble he's in. Kim turns back to Riwa and tells her it's her turn to handle things. He points toward the pile of bodies and tells her to clean up the mess. Riwa just stares at him in disbelief, calling him an exploitative boss under her breath. Anyway, Kim's more interested in their actual customer, and whether or not he's managed to win any money. The scene shifts back to the gambling den, where the moon hangs high over a much darker game. Inside, a crowd is gathered around a high-stakes table, watching the drama unfold. Chung Sang is sweating bullets, staring at his cards with a desperate, frantic look in his eyes. He slams his fists on the table, screaming that it's impossible to lose 5 rounds in a row by a single point. He points an accusing finger at the house, convinced the whole thing is rigged. The house manager just laughs it off, telling him he's just had some bad luck. He goads him further, asking if a prestigious disciple of the Manhwa sect is really going to throw a tantrum over a loss. The entire room breaks into laughter at Chung Sang's expense. Under the moonlight, the humiliation is complete. Chung Sang stumbles out of the building, looking completely broken. Manager Kim is waiting for him with a mock-friendly greeting. "Are you out already?" Chung Sang looks at him like he's a savior, ecstatic that Kim hasn't left yet. He begs Kim to lend him more money, his addiction completely taking over. He's convinced that if he just gets one more chance, he can win it all back and pay everything off. He's practically manic now, begging for just one more loan. Kim says it's possible based on his credit rating, but he's going to need some collateral this time. Chung Sang freezes for a second, the word collateral finally hitting home. In his desperation, he pulls out a jade plaque, a sacred item bestowed by his master. He's completely lost his mind, handing over something he should never part with. Kim accepts the jade and hands over a massive pile of coins. Chung Sang doesn't even hesitate, sprinting back inside with his new stack. For the next 2 hours, the cycle just repeats itself. Chung Sang keeps running back and forth, fueled by nothing but blind hope. He bursts out again, screaming for even more money. He swears on the name of the Manhwa sect that he'll pay it all back with interest if he can just win this next round. Kim just smiles calmly and tells him to relax, assuring the valued customer that they believe in him. That leads to the third loan, as Chung Sang's hands tremble over his remaining coins. He's swearing and sweating, the pressure of his losses finally breaking his spirit. Then comes the fourth loan, more silver exchanging hands under the cover of night. Eventually, they reach the fifth loan, and the weight of the debt is getting astronomical. Chung Sang slams his cards down one last time, the sound echoing through the courtyard. He's left groaning at the table, completely tapped out and defeated. He lets out a long, agonizing scream, the reality of what he's done finally setting in. Outside, Kim and Rihwa watch the building, their work finally finished for the night. Kim closes his eyes with a satisfied smirk, ready to call it a day. Manager Kim turns to Mac Rihwa and casually tells her it's time to head home for the night. Rihwa is taken aback, worriedly asking what they're going to do about the massive amount of money they just lent out. Kim just yawns and dismisses her concern, comparing the debt to soy sauce that only gets better the longer it sits and ages. Rihwa can only stare at him in confusion, completely unable to grasp his logic or his long-term plan. Kim gives a dark, predatory smirk, thinking about how he can cut that precious belly open whenever he chooses later on. The scene shifts to the majestic peaks and grand architecture of the Manhwa sect, standing proud against the sky. Inside, the sun shines through the quiet and ornate hallways of the sect's main buildings. Light filters softly through the intricate paper patterns of a private residence's closed doors. Within the room, Chung-sang sits alone on the edge of his bed, looking like a man who has lost everything. He hunches over, burying his face in his hands as the crushing weight of his situation finally starts to sink in. Damn it, damn it, he mutters over and over, trapped in a desperate loop of regret and self-loathing. He stares blankly, sweating and trembling as he wonders how he could have possibly lost his mind so completely. He thinks back to the high-interest loans he took out, all signed under the prestigious name of the Manhwa sect. The memory of putting up his master's sacred, purple jade plaque as collateral makes him feel physically ill with fear. He knows that if this is ever discovered, being expelled will be the least of his worries. He trembles at the thought of his master literally peeling the flesh off his bones as punishment for such a disgrace. Knock, knock, knock. A sudden rapping at his door makes Chung-sang jump in pure, unadulterated terror. A junior brother calls out from the hallway, informing him that the sect leader is looking for him. Chung-sang's heart nearly stops, his eyes wide and full of panic as he faces his worst nightmare. Master, he stammers, convinced that his secret gambling life has already been exposed. In the grand main hall of the sect, the air is thick with a heavy, formal atmosphere. Chung-sang is on his knees, head pressed to the floor as he bows deeply before his superior. Taoist Hyunjang, the venerable sect leader, looks down at his disciple with a stern and solemn expression. "Why, yes, sect leader," Chung-sang stammers, his face dripping with nervous sweat as he awaits his fate. Hyunjang notes that he missed his morning training today and asks if he's become lazy lately. Chung-sang lies, claiming he was just feeling unwell, all while his mind is screaming about his hidden gambling debts. Hyunjang sighs, lamenting that a plum blossom swordsman should be able to manage his own physical health. He reaches into his robes and tosses a small, dark object through the air toward the kneeling man. The object hits the wooden floor with a sharp clatter right in front of Chung-sang. Chung-sang looks down in surprise, staring at the small, ornate box that just landed before him. A wooden box, he wonders, his brow furrowing as he tries to understand what's happening. As he leans in, he notices a faint, refreshing medicinal scent wafting from inside the container. Hyunjang reveals that it's a plum blossom pill and tells him to eat it to restore his strength. Chung-sang's jaw nearly hits the floor in shock. Plum blossom pill. With trembling hands, he slowly reaches out and lifts the lid of the small box. Resting on a silk cushion is a brilliant, deep purple pill that pulses with a powerful spiritual aura. He stares at it in awe, recognizing it as a legendary treasure that most martial artists only dream of seeing. He feels a wave of intense guilt, wondering why his master is giving him such a gift after his shameful night at the gambling den. He looks up at the sect leader, his voice cracking with overwhelming emotion. Sect leader." To his surprise, Hyunjang is smiling at him with genuine fatherly kindness and warmth. The sect leader tells him that the future of Mount Hua rests on his shoulders, so he must recover properly. Chung-sang is moved to his core, his eyes filling with tears of both shame and profound gratitude. Chung-sang is briefly touched by his master's warm consideration, his eyes softening as the weight of the gift sinks in. However, his expression quickly turns grim as a desperate thought crosses his mind. If he sells the pill, he might be able to get the jade plaque back. From a distance, Chung-sang looks small and isolated, a lone figure huddled in the vast courtyard of the sect. He feels like complete trash for being the kind of person who calculates the monetary value of a gift from his master before anything else. The sound of murmuring voices nearby catches his attention, pulling him out of his dark thoughts. He looks toward the gate, seeing a group of commoners who have come to pay their respects to the Mount Hua sect. The common folk bow low, pleading for the Taoists to look upon them with favor and grant them their blessings. The Mount Hua disciples smile warmly, telling the people to rise and promising to pray for them with all their hearts. These are the simple, common people who have traveled far to borrow even a small piece of the miraculous energy of Mount Hua. They offer what little they have, carefully wrapped fruits and rice cakes, their faces glowing with boundless trust and awe. To the outsiders, everything about the Mount Hua sect appears pure, noble, and beyond reproach. Contrastingly, Chengsang breaks into a cold sweat, unable to reconcile that noble image with his own secret disgrace. He sits back on the cold floor, his face pale as he continues to grapple with his guilt and his growing debt. "Damn it," he hisses through gritted teeth, the pressure of his situation becoming almost unbearable. He collapses backward with a heavy thud, clutching the small wooden box to his chest as if it were his only lifeline. He stares at the ornate box, his mind finally settling on a single, desperate course of action. Fine. He tucks the pill box deep into his robes, convinced that this is the only inevitable choice left for him. He stands up abruptly, his eyes hardened with a dark resolve. "I'll sell it to the pawn shop." He reasons that eating the pill would only help his body recover slightly, which is a small benefit in the grand scheme of things. In his mind, selling the pill is a much lesser sin than losing the sacred plaque his master entrusted to him forever. He vows that once this immediate fire is put out, he will train until he dies to make Mount Hua rich and powerful. He stares off into the distance, trying to convince himself that this dishonorable path is actually the true path to redemption. As he walks away from the sect buildings, he swears to himself that once this is solved, he'll never go near a gambling den again. Under the cold, silent light of the moon, Chengsang makes his quiet exit, his journey into deeper trouble just beginning. Footsteps kick up dust as someone sprints across the grounds at high speed. He launches himself into the air, clearing the high stone wall in one smooth motion. The figure hangs suspended for a moment, silhouetted against the massive, glowing full moon. He lands with a soft thud, immediately dropping into a low crouch to stay out of sight. Chengsang stays low for a second, his face drenched in sweat as he looks around nervously. He bows his head deeply, offering a quiet apology to his master for the trouble he's about to cause. Thinking he's in the clear, he starts making his way through the thick forest toward the exit. But he suddenly freezes mid-step when he realizes he's not alone out here. A tall figure is standing perfectly still right in his path, illuminated by the moonlight. Goatee Man 1 is waiting there for him with a calm, unsettling smile. Chengsang's heart practically stops when he realizes exactly who just caught him. He immediately drops into a respectful bow, trying his best to hide how much he's panicking. He's in deep trouble because this senior brother is legendary for being the most rigid person in the entire sect. Goatee Man 1 keeps that same polite smile while asking where he thinks he's going at this hour. Chengsang forces a nervous grin and stammers that he just came out for some fresh air. In the dead of night, someone is caught trying to scale the sect's walls. A senior disciple stares him down, wondering what on earth he's doing out here. Chengsang breaks into a cold sweat, realizing his excuse was probably too weak to work. He's cornered and he knows it. Hyun looks him over with a suspicious gaze while the boy awkwardly clutches his chest. It's a standoff in the dark woods. The senior's eyes narrow, focusing on where the younger disciple is hiding his hand. Something isn't right here. Chengsang keeps his hand pressed firmly against his robes, trying to play it cool. It's not working. Hyun isn't buying the "it's nothing" act. He demands to see exactly what's being hidden in those robes. With a sudden slip, a small black box falls right out of Chengsang's grasp. The secret is literally out in the open now. Hyun catches the box and clicks it open, his eyes widening as he sees the prize inside. It's a rare plum blossom pill. The purple medicine glows with a soft, ethereal light, a treasure any martial artist would kill for. The senior asks where a low-level disciple got such a high-grade item. Chengsang quickly lies, claiming the sect leader gave it to him personally. Hyun is stunned, finding it hard to believe the leader would hand out something so valuable to a nobody. But his doubt quickly vanishes, replaced by a massive, beaming smile. He's completely fallen for the lie. He laughs, praising the master's foresight for recognizing Chengsang's hidden talent. He's actually happy for him. Then the logical question hits. Why is he wandering around with it in the middle of the night? Chengsang's brain works overtime to come up with another story on the fly. He puts on a modest act, saying he didn't want the other disciples to be jealous, so he went out to take it in private. Hyun has actually moved to tears by what he thinks is incredible humility and consideration for his peers. He wipes his eyes, convinced that the suspicious movements were just a sign of the boy's pure heart. He apologizes for ever doubting him and tells him he'll forgive his secret mission. The senior decides to stand guard right here, and now so Chung-sang can take the pill immediately. This is bad news. Chung-sang's jaw drops. This definitely wasn't part of the plan to sneak out and solve his debt. Hyun insists, explaining that he needs to watch over the boy's energy flow to make sure everything goes right. He plops down on the ground, ready to fulfill his self-appointed duty as a protector. With a cheerful wave, he tells Chung-sang to sit down and get started. He's all smiles and zero suspicion. The boy stares at the rigid old man in front of him, internally screaming at how cheerful the guy is being. He tries one last desperate rejection, claiming he prefers to train in total solitude. He's begging for an exit. The senior's tone turns stern as he warns about the lethal danger of chi deviation. He's not taking no for an answer. He tells the boy to stop being so formal and just get it over with. The pressure is on. Chung-sang realizes he's stuck. His plan is falling apart because the guy is just too earnest. He throws out every excuse he can think of: muscle pain, a stomachache, but Hyun-ha has a counter for all of them. An awkward silence stretches between them as they sit in the dark woods. The standoff continues. Chung-sang stares blankly into the distance, fully accepting that he's absolutely screwed. Slowly, he clicks the lid of the box open one more time. There's no escaping this now. He sits there with the box open, while Hyun watches with eager, starry-eyed expectation. The boy's hand trembles as he picks up the purple pill. He's terrified of what this much power will do to him. He takes a deep breath and brings the medicine to his open mouth, hesitating for a final moment. He finally gulps it down. The stolen pill is gone and there's no turning back. A massive explosion of internal energy suddenly swirls around them, lighting up the clearing. Chung-sang quickly forms a meditative seal with his hands to try and control the surging power. His entire body is enveloped in a brilliant blue aura as the spiritual medicine begins its work. Hyun is amazed, seeing how clear and powerful the boy's energy has become in such a short time. He congratulates the disciple, fully convinced that the master's decision was perfect. He has no idea what he's just unleashed. Chung-sang jumps to his feet, looking revitalized. His senior, Hyun, stays seated on the grass, watching him with an impressed expression. The boy brings his hands together in a polite, respectful greeting. He thanks the senior for his grace, playing the part of the perfect, humble student. He flashes a wide, almost too enthusiastic grin, claiming that thanks to this help, he can now dedicate himself even further to his path. The full moon hangs high and bright over the dark silhouette of the mountain woods. Finally alone, Chung-sang leans against a tree, his face going blank and tired as his facade finally drops. The weight of his situation finally hits him. He stares off into the dark, realizing it's truly over. He looks down at his chest, where the energy is still swirling. The pill is gone. He just ate his only way out of debt. Without that treasure to sell, there's absolutely no way for him to come up with the money he owes. He thinks about the bank agents. If they show up to collect, his secret gambling habit and every other shameful mistake will be exposed to the entire sect. He can still see Manager Kim's smug face from their last meeting, holding out that stack of coins and the cursed contract. Expulsion is the only thing waiting for him, now if he can't find a solution. A dark, desperate idea starts to flicker in his eyes as he stares into the shadows. He stops his downward spiral for a second. Wait a minute, he thinks. He crouches low in the dark, a cold, murderous logic taking over his mind. He realizes that a debt only truly exists as long as there's a creditor around to collect it. A sinister, twisted grin spreads across his face as he leans closer into the night. He's a plum blossom swordsman, after all. If he sets his mind to it, he can just make those lone sharks disappear forever. He feels the massive amount of internal energy from the stolen pill overflowing in his core. He's never been stronger. He draws his sword, the moonlight reflecting off the cold steel. Why should he even bother paying them back? His eyes glow with a yellow, manic light. When I can just kill them, he thinks, fully committing to the idea. He's done with the panic. Now there's only cold, calculated murder. He stands tall in the silent woods, sword in hand, ready to wipe his slate clean in the most permanent way possible. The thought of just killing them loops in his mind like a dark mantra. Later that night, the scene shifts to a quiet inn on the edge of town, bathed in moonlight. A pair of boots click softly against the wooden floorboards of the hallway. Chung-sang stalks through the building, his face pale and focused like a ghost in the dark. Sweat beads on his forehead, but his gaze is like ice as he moves toward his target. He arrives at the Hwayang Inn, exactly where the bank agents told him they'd be. He remembers their last meeting clearly. They mentioned they were staying in room 5. He narrows his eyes, staring at the empty hall ahead of him. The building is eerily quiet. A sliver of bright light spills out from under a nearby door, cutting through the darkness of the corridor. The entire inn is dead quiet at this hour, making every small sound feel amplified. Every step he takes is heavy with the weight of the crime he's about to commit. He walks along the balcony, telling himself that the answer to his problem was simple all along. If he kills the creditors and takes back his jade plaque, he can just forget this whole nightmare ever happened. He stops right in front of the door marked with the character for 5. This is the place. He stares at the number, confirming he's at the right room, room 5. His shadow looms over the thin paper door, looking dark and ominous in the dim light. Chung-sang stands ready, his hand already tight on the hilt of his sword. He's just seconds away. He pauses for a moment as the sound of muffled conversation filters through the wood. He catches the faint but undeniable voices of a man and a woman talking quietly inside. It's them. Chung-sang stands outside the door, his mind flashing back to the faces of manager Kim and the woman. He's certain he has the right room. His hand tightens around the hilt of his sword, preparing for the kill. With a sudden burst of energy, he draws his blade and charges, aiming to end things with a single, decisive strike. He feels a brief flicker of pity for his victims, thinking that at least they won't be lonely in death. The floorboards shatter under the weight of his initial impact as he bursts into the room. He lands in the center of the room, wood and debris flying in every direction from the sheer force of his entry. Without hesitation, he unleashes the 7th stance of the plum blossom sword art. A massive cross of pink energy erupts from his blade, scattering spiritual petals throughout the space. The technique, known as falling flowers, scattering petals, creates a beautiful but deadly aura around the swordsman. The force of the attack is so great that it completely levels the interior of the room. From the outside, the Hwayang Inn appears to explode as a pillar of pink light shoots through the roof into the night sky. Chung-sang stands amidst the smoke and ruins, his breathing heavy but his focus sharp. He looks around at the devastation he's caused, whispering to himself that it's finally over. A strange sensation of relief washes over him, as if something that had been constricting his heart has finally broken. He doesn't feel any guilt or regret in this moment. Instead, he feels a profound sense of lightness. He remembers the crushing weight of the debt he owed, a burden that felt like a hand around his throat. Now he can finally breathe. Downstairs, the other guests and staff are shouting in alarm, drawn by the sound of the explosion. Panic briefly flashes in his eyes as he remembers why he came. He needs to find his jade plaque before fleeing. He begins frantically digging through the piles of broken wood and shattered furniture. His eyes widen as a glint of white catches his attention amidst the gray dust and splinters. He lets out a triumphant cry as he spots his prize buried in the wreckage. There it is, the jade plaque, looking pristine despite the chaos and destruction around it. He grabs the tassel and immediately sprints away from the scene, not wanting to be found in the ruins. He leaps through the hole in the roof, disappearing into the dark, moonlit night. He runs through the town with incredible speed, his heart racing with a mixture of adrenaline and joy. To anyone watching, he's just a blur of dark robes moving through the silent, sleeping streets. As he distances himself from the inn, a wide, manic grin begins to form on his face. He's panting hard, the physical exertion and the psychological relief merging into one intense experience. He pauses for just a second to catch his breath, his eyes wide and wild with excitement. A soft, dark chuckle escapes his lips, quickly growing into a full-blown, manic laugh. He's ecstatic. The debt, the collectors, the threat of expulsion, it's all gone in a single night. He holds up the jade plaque, feeling like he's just woken up from a long, terrible nightmare. He is overwhelmed by the joy of having his life back and everything returning to its rightful place. However, in his state of overwhelming relief, Chengsang makes a mistake he normally never would have. Huayan County may be quiet at night, but it is never truly unobserved. Normally, a cautious man like him would have stuck to the deserted back alleys. But he is so intoxicated by his sudden freedom that he runs right down the center of the main, lantern-lit road. He doesn't even bother to hide his tracks or his presence as he races home. He is so caught up in his success that he doesn't even notice that someone is watching him from a high, rocky outcrop overlooking the town. It's the senior brother, Hyun. The moonlight illuminates the roofs of the town as the silent observer follows the boy's progress with a cold gaze. Back in the safety of his own room, Chengsang admires his recovered treasure. He lies back, a smug and satisfied smile on his face as he gazes at the jade plaque one last time before resting. Chengsang admires his jade plaque with a smug, relieved smile, thinking that this small object is finally back where it belongs. As he drifts off to sleep, he tells himself that all he needs to do now is forget the events of the night ever happened. Suddenly, a series of sharp knocks at his door jolts him awake. A cold sweat breaks out on his face as he hears a voice calling his name from outside the door. He recognizes it instantly. Terrified, he whispers the name of the visitor, his senior brother, Hyun. He watches the shadow under the door with growing dread. Hyun, an elder Taoist of the Mount Hua sect, enters the room with a stern and imposing presence. He notes how late it is for Chengsang to still be awake. The younger man tries to play it off, stuttering that his training hadn't been going well. Hyun repeats the excuse with a hint of skepticism in his voice, his expression unreadable behind his dark goatee. He turns away and begins to pace slowly around the room, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the silence. Chengsang watches him nervously, wondering what he knows. The senior brother mentions that he heard there was a massive commotion down in Huayan County earlier that night, where an entire inn was smashed to pieces. He stops and looks back at Chengsang with a sharp, piercing gaze that seems to cut right through him. He reveals that the destruction was clearly caused by someone using the plum blossom sword art. Chengsang's heart sinks as the realization of his carelessness hits him. In a voice that brooks no argument, Hyun commands Chengsang to show him his hands. The younger disciple is stunned, unable to find his voice. Hyun explains that wielding a sword with such intensity always leaves physical traces on the hands of the practitioner. Chengsang looks down at his own hands, his mind racing for a way out of the trap he's walked into. He can feel the guilt written all over his face. He swallows hard, his throat feeling dry as he realizes he can't refuse the command. He slowly extends his hands, hopping against hope that the evidence isn't too obvious. As he holds out his hand, it begins to tremble uncontrollably, a clear sign of his internal panic and the physical strain of the battle. Hyun watches the shaking hands with a cold, knowing look, his suspicions all but confirmed by the boy's reaction. The elder brother's expression hardens as he looks Chengsang in the eye, the weight of his disappointment clear in his features. The silence in the room is heavy with unspoken accusations. Hyun's gaze is unwavering, pinning Chengsang to the spot. With a sudden, fluid motion, Hyun draws his own sword and points it directly at the younger man's throat. Chengsang gasps in shock, the cold steel of the blade a stark reminder of the trouble he's in. He looks at his senior brother with wide, terrified eyes. Hyun demands an answer, his voice booming in the small room. He wants to know why on earth Chengsang would do something so reckless and dangerous. Chengsang tries to play dumb, stammering that he doesn't know what his senior brother is talking about. But Hyun isn't fooled, accusing him of lying until the bitter end. The elder reveals the final piece of evidence. He saw Chengsang returning from the inn, walking right down the center of the main street with a triumphant smile on his face. The boy's secret is out. Hyun watched from the moonlit cliffs as the young disciple fled the scene of his crime. He confronts Chung-sang in his room, shamming him for using their sect's sword art to slaughter civilians. Chung-sang can only stare back in horror, sweat pouring down his face as his perfect facade crumbles. His strength leaves him, and he drops heavily to the floor. He begs for mercy while kowtowing, confessing that he's committed a sin beyond forgiveness. The word finally breaks through his terror. He admits to his gambling addiction. With that first admission, the rest of the truth starts pouring out of him. It began with the rush of winning big at the gambling den, surrounded by a cheering crowd. But the luck ran dry, replaced by the mounting pressure of a brutal losing streak. Desperate to fix his mistakes, he manically wagered his master's precious jade plaque. He ended up signing his life away on a contract for the Continental Bank. That's when a mysterious woman approached him in the shadows of the back alleys. She was accompanied by manager Kim, whose smile was as cold as his sinister eyes. Back in the present, Chung-sang swears he really intended to pay them back. He explains how the debt spiraled until getting that plaque back was the only thing he could think about. Hyun stares down at him, cutting through the excuses to the bloody truth. The boy chose murder. He asks if the boy really thought a debt just vanishes when the creditor is dead. Chung-sang slams his head against the wood again, crying out for his martial uncle's forgiveness. He pleads for another chance, willing to accept any punishment as long as his life is spared. The elder remains silent, his expression unreadable as he looks down at the pathetic display. The silence stretches on while Chung-sang stays pinned to the floor in a deep kowtow. Finally, Hyunhee puts his sword away and tells him to stand up. Chung-sang looks up with a bloodied forehead, his face twisted in confusion and lingering terror. Hyun turns away with a heavy sigh, looking out into the night. He looks back at the boy, his gaze cold and calculating. He reasons that a rising star of Mount Hua cannot be allowed to fall to ruin over something like this. To Chung-sang's shock, the elder declares that he'll turn a blind eye just this once. A single tear of relief rolls down Chung-sang's face as he realizes he isn't going to die. He can barely find the words to thank his martial uncle. Hyun stands by the window, clarifying that while the murder of innocent people is wrong, the reputation of the Mount Hua sect serves a cause much greater than a few lost lives. Chung-sang stands there trembling, the weight of his survival beginning to sink in. Chung-sang is a complete mess, sobbing with a nasty bruise right in the middle of his forehead. He bows low to Hyun, thanking his martial uncle for basically saving his life. Hyun doesn't look relieved, though. He's got a heavy, serious expression on his face. He wants to know exactly who those people were that the kid supposedly killed. Looking out at the moon, the elder says that even if they were loan sharks, their deaths are a weight he needs to pray for. Chung-sang starts sweating, probably realizing he doesn't actually know much about his victims. He admits the group claimed they were from something called the Continental Bank. Before he can even finish his sentence, Hyun lunges forward. The elder grabs the boy by the collar, his eyes wide with a sudden, sharp panic. Chung-sang is caught off guard, asking what the hell is wrong. Hyun is half shrouded in shadow now, his voice dropping as he demands to hear that name again. He's got a death grip on the kid's robes, towering over him. The disciple repeats it, the Continental Bank. You can see it in his hands. The elder is actually shaking with fear. Hyun is pale as a ghost, staring at the boy like he's just announced the end of the world. He repeats the name under his breath, barely able to process the disaster. He demands the name of the man leading the group. Chung-sang is sweating buckets now, sensing the sheer terror coming off his uncle. He lets it out. The man called himself Manager Kim. That's the final blow. Hyun is drenched in sweat, his composure completely shattered. Outside, the Mount Hua sect is quiet, but that peace isn't going to last. Footsteps hammer against the ground as someone sprints across the rooftops in a blind panic. Hyun bursts into the sect leader's room like his life depends on it. He screams for the leader, his voice cracking from the strain. Sect leader Hyunjang doesn't even look up, He's busy with his calligraphy. As Hyun collapses on his knees, the leader starts lecturing him about keeping his dignity. He focuses on his brushstrokes, claiming a master's mind should be like a clear mirror. He's the picture of Zen, explaining that nothing should ever disturb his focus. Then Hyun shouts that the Continental Bank has appeared. Just like that, his steady hand slips, and a big smear of ink ruins the scroll. The brush drops right out of his hand. It clatters against the floor and rolls away. All that dignity is gone. The leader is wide-eyed and sweating. The whole room goes cold as the past finally comes back to haunt them. Hyunjung is frozen, the silence in the study suddenly feeling heavy and suffocating. He lets out a shaky breath, struggling to keep his composure as the name of the bank echoes in his mind. He looks at Hyun, his voice trembling as he asks why on earth the Continental Bank would suddenly show up now. Hyun is practically hysterical. The news that a disciple might have killed someone from that bank is like a death sentence for the whole sect. Hyunjung's eyes are wide with a primal fear he hasn't felt in decades. He stands up abruptly, his mind racing as he demands to know if those people are actually dead. He stares into the distance, the weight of the situation crashing down on him all at once. Gritting his teeth, he invokes his ultimate authority, the Plum Blossom Command Tablet, and orders an immediate summons of every single disciple. The mere mention of the tablet is enough to send a chill through the room. It's only used for the most absolute emergencies. He needs Chung-sang brought before him this instant. He wants to hear every single detail of where and how those people were killed. He turns toward the door, his movements stiff and mechanical as if he's in a trance. Beads of sweat roll down his face as the gravity of his leadership becomes a physical burden. His hand is visibly shaking as he clenches his fist, the fear manifesting physically. He stares blankly, his mind filled with a single terrifying question. Could it really be those two? In the long history of the sect, there was once a catastrophe known as the Continental War. Most of the current disciples have forgotten it, but Hyunjung is one of the few survivors who remembers every horrific detail. The memory hits him like a physical blow, the screams, the smell of smoke, and the taste of iron in the air. He sees a young disciple lost in the carnage, surrounded by a world of fire. It's an image he could never forget, even if he lived 1,000 years. A literal mountain of corpses, the pride of the Mount Hua sect reduced to a pile of meat and broken swords. It only took a single man from the bank to turn their entire home into a wasteland. Back in the present, Hyunjung shuts his eyes tightly, trying to block out the ghosts of the past. He tells Hyun that he doesn't know for sure, but if it really is them, they are all in grave danger. He clenches his jaw so hard it looks like his teeth might crack under the pressure. He tells the elder to move quickly. There's no time left for hesitation. Looking out at the night sky, he knows the very survival of Mount Hua is hanging by a thread tonight. Outside, the emergency bell rings, echoing through the mountains and waking every soul in the compound. Disciples pour into the main courtyard, their faces filled with confusion and the haze of half-sleep. The air is thick with whispers as the crowd grows, no one knowing why they've been called out at this hour. One of the disciples is panting, having run across the complex in a blind panic. Everyone asking the same question, what the hell is going on in the middle of the night? The mention of the command tablet sends a wave of dread through the ranks. It usually means a direct invasion. In the entire history of the sect, a summons like this has never happened without an external enemy at the gates. Heavy footsteps approach the platform, and every voice in the courtyard suddenly dies out. Hyunjung steps out from the shadows, his face illuminated by the lanterns. He stands at the edge of the platform, looking down at his disciples like a judge delivering a verdict. The moonlight catches the sharp lines of his face, making him look older and more terrifying than ever. The disciples recoil in shock. They've never seen a look like this on their leader's face before. His usual gentle and calm demeanor has been completely erased, replaced by a gaze that could cut through stone. A dead silence hangs over the gathering as they wait for him to speak. His voice cuts through the night air, calling out one name with chilling precision, Chung-sang. He commands the disciple to step forward, and the crowd parts to let the bruised boy through. Sang is absolutely petrified, his heart pounding against his ribs like a trapped bird. As he walks through the crowd of his peers, the rhythmic sound of his own footsteps feels like a countdown to his doom. He reaches the foot of the platform and quickly drops into a respectful bow before the sect leader. His voice is barely a whisper, thick with fear as he acknowledges the summons. Before he can even finish his sentence, a heavy blow catches him across the face, the sound of the slap echoing through the silent courtyard. He's sent sprawling onto the stone floor, his head ringing as Hyunjang looks down at him with pure, unadulterated rage. Hyunjang's face is contorted, his mouth open in a primal scream that shocks every disciple watching. He follows up with another strike, his foot connecting with Sang as he demands to know if the boy has any concept of the disaster he's caused. Sang gasps for air, a spray of blood leaving his mouth as he tries to process the physical assault. Hyunjang doesn't stop, his voice booming like thunder as he screams the name that has been haunting his nightmares, the Continental Bank. He shouts that Sang dared to touch someone from an organization that could wipe them off the map in a single night. In the crowd, the other disciples are frozen in place, their faces pale as they witness their usually calm leader lose all control. The name Continental Bank ripples through the ranks, a name that carries a weight most of them are only now beginning to understand. Hyunjang looks like he's on the verge of a breakdown, his eyes bulging as he gasps for air, his hands clutching at his own chest. He screams that it would have been better if Sang had just died out there, rather than bringing this curse back home. The other elders rush to his side, pleading with him to calm down before he does something he'll truly regret. Hyunjang is panting heavily, his face drenched in sweat and his eyes wild with a mixture of anger and grief. On the ground, Sang is a broken mess, his fingers clawing at the stone as he tries to find the strength to stay upright. A pool of blood begins to form under the boy's mouth, a grim testament to the force of the sect leader's wrath. Hyunjang stares down at him, the silence between them more terrifying than the previous screaming. He calls Sang an absolute fool, his voice now low and dangerous. He declares that with this one act of stupidity, the boy has effectively ruined the Mount Hua sect. Sang can't even find the words to defend himself, his eyes glazed over as he stares at the blood on the floor. He collapses further onto his hands and knees, a wet cough racking his body. His hands tremble as they grip the stone, droplets of sweat and blood falling onto the dark surface. He stammers out an apology, admitting that he knows it was wrong to gamble and even worse to kill. He looks up with a pathetic, confused expression, admitting that he truly doesn't understand why this particular group is such a problem. The answer is another violent slap that sends him spinning, Hyunjang calling him a brainless idiot for his ignorance. Hyunjang leans in close, his face a mask of fury as he asks if the boy really thinks this is about gambling or some random killing. He shouts that if it had been some street beggar or a third-rate thug, he wouldn't have even blinked an eye. Sang is reeling, his hand pressed against his swollen cheek as he tries to make sense of the world. He lets out a series of ragged gasps, the physical and emotional toll finally breaking his spirit. Hyunjang's fist is clenched so tight his veins are bulging, his knuckles white as he fights the urge to strike again. He leans down, his voice trembling with a desperate, fearful intensity as he asks the most important question: are they truly dead? He practically begs for a yes, his eyes searching Sang's face for any sign of certainty. Sang nods frantically, his voice cracking as he insists that it's definitely the case. Hyunjang presses further, his voice a frantic whisper as he asks if the bodies were actually confirmed. He lunges forward and grabs Sang by the collar, pulling him up until they are nose to nose. He demands that the boy speak clearly and tell him if he saw them take their very last breath. Sang stammers that he blew up the entire room with the plum blossom sword art, so he simply assumes they must be dead. The word assume triggers another explosion of rage, Hyunjang's eyes widening in horror at the lack of confirmation. He calls him a moron and throws him back to the ground, his voice cracking as he screams about the boy's failure to make absolutely sure. Hyunjang's voice is a jagged blade of pure terror, as he demands to know the consequences of the target surviving. Chung-sang remains slumped on the ground, his silence a pathetic admission of his own reckless incompetence. In his mind, Chung-sang feels a surge of bitter resentment, unable to reconcile his actions with the sect leader's extreme reaction. He remembers the sound of the old in splintering and collapsing, a memory he believed was proof of his success. He recalls the pillars snapping like dry twigs under the force of his attack, convinced that no one could have walked away from that wreckage. To his simple mind, the idea that mere money-grubbing merchants could survive such destruction is an impossibility. But for Hyunjang, who knows the true depth of the world's darkness, the logic is far grimmer and more certain. He whispers with a chilling finality that it would have been a mercy if Chung-sang had simply died alongside his victims. The warmth that usually defines the sect leader's voice has completely evaporated, replaced by a frost that freezes the air. He tells the boy that it would have been better to be executed in the streets like a common criminal than to bring this doom upon them. He states with a haunting certainty that such a death would have spared the Mount Hua sect from total annihilation. The weight of those words finally pierces through Chung-sang's shock, the true gravity of his situation beginning to settle in. He begins to realize that Manager Kim and his companions were never just simple debt collectors or ordinary merchants. They are beings of such power and influence that even the great sect leader of Mount Hua trembles at the mere mention of their name. Hyunjang spins around, his voice booming across the courtyard as he places the entire sect on the highest state of alert. The disciples respond in unison, their shouts echoing the sudden, sharp shift in the atmosphere of the mountain. The rhythmic thud of feet hitting the stone floor signals the rapid deployment of guards to every gate and mountain path. Orders are barked into the night, calling for units to take their positions and seal off all access to the sect's inner grounds. As the chaos erupts around him, Chung-sang remains on the floor, his face a mask of blood and utter confusion. He stares blankly into the distance, his mind unable to comprehend how a simple debt could lead to the downfall of his entire world. Hyunjang looks down one last time, his gaze devoid of any pity or fatherly concern. He tells the boy to pray with everything he has that his pathetic swordsmanship actually managed to kill those people. A horn blast sounds, its deep, resonant tone cutting through the night as it signals the start of the lockdown. Across the mountain peaks, the alarm continues to ring, a herald of the storm that is about to descend upon the Mount Hua sect. Hyun's face goes pale as the realization hits him. Suddenly, a guard shouts a report from the front gate. Chung-sang is slumped on the ground, wheezing out that two suspicious people are approaching. He seems confused that there are only two of them. High above, the full moon lights up the mountain. Plum blossom petals drift through the cool night air. Manager Kim and Mak Rihwa stroll casually up the main path. They aren't in any rush. The pair looks completely unbothered as they approach the sect's stronghold. Manager Kim wears a confident, knowing smile. Mak Rihwa keeps her expression neutral as they reach the entrance. The guards at the gate immediately order them to halt. Guard B shouts that the sect is closed off to all outsiders by the leader's order. He demands their names and their reason for coming to Mount Hua. Manager Kim doesn't look intimidated at all. He takes a calm breath as the wind blows. He steps forward with total authority. He identifies himself as Manager Kim from the Continental Bank. Then he delivers the news. He's here to collect a debt that the entire Mount Hua sect owes. Manager Kim and Mak Rihwa make their way toward the Mount Hua sect, petals drifting around them as they approach the gates. Kim wears a calm, almost bored expression, like this is just another day at the office. Rihwa follows closely behind, her eyes sharp as she scans the legendary sect's grounds. They're immediately halted by the guards at the main gate, who aren't exactly rolling out the red carpet. One guard barks that they aren't accepting any outside guests, following orders from the sect leader himself. He demands to know their names, their sect, and exactly why they think they can just walk into Mount Hua. A few more petals fall to the dirt in the heavy silence that follows. Kim takes a single, deliberate step forward, crushing a blossom under his boot. He looks the guard dead in the eye and introduces himself as Manager Kim of the Continental Bank. With a predator's grin, he adds that he's here to collect a debt owed in Mount Hua's name. Flashback to earlier at the inn, the entire area erupts in a violent explosion, the stone floor and surrounding buildings shattering instantly. The massive explosion draws a crowd, and people begin to gather to see what just happened. The civilians stare in shock at the chaotic scene, wondering if someone had just fired a literal cannon straight into the courtyard. Thick dust and splintered wood fill the air where the two visitors were standing just a second ago. Heavy beams and debris crash down into the crater left by the strike. Rihwa's breath hitches as she realizes she's still alive in the middle of the wreckage. She's pinned to the floor, panting as the dust settles around her. Kim is right there over her, having used his own body as a shield to absorb the entire impact. She stares up at him, stunned that her manager actually put himself on the line like that. Kim looks down with his usual calm gaze and asks if she's doing all right. She confirms she's okay, but she can't hide her relief that he seems completely unscathed. Kim stands up among the ruins of the gatehouse, brushing off the dust like it's nothing but a minor inconvenience. She tries to apologize, feeling responsible for getting him caught in the crossfire. But Kim just tells her not to sweat it, explaining that protecting their assets is just basic bank procedure. He reaches out a hand to help her up, his expression softened ever so slightly. He reminds her that she's a valuable asset to the Continental Bank, and losing her would be a huge hit to the company. The compliment catches her off guard, sending a quick flush to her cheeks as she stares at him. But the moment is brief. Kim pulls her to her feet and declares that it's finally time to get to work. They walk deeper into the sect grounds, leaving the destroyed entrance behind as the mountains loom over them. The guard from before swallows hard, his face pale with sweat as he realizes he just tried to kill a monster. The disciples whisper in terror, the name Continental Bank sounding more like a death knell than a business. A shadow falls across the courtyard as a powerful figure emerges from the inner halls. It's Elder Hyunhyo, looking every bit the stern martial master with his sharp goatee and piercing gaze. The disciples scramble out of the way, calling out to the elder in a mix of respect and fear. Hyunhyo descends the massive stone stairs with measured, silent steps. To everyone's absolute disbelief, the elder lowers his head and brings his hands together in a formal greeting. He identifies himself as Hyunhyo of Mount Hua and asks if they really represent the bank. The guards look like they've seen a ghost, their jaws dropping at the sight of their superior bowing. Rihwa watches the display in silence, realizing just how much weight the bank's name truly carries. Every single person present is in a state of pure shock. It's unheard of for a high-ranking Mount Hua elder to show such deference. But there he is, bowing deeply to a man the world sees as nothing more than a debt collector. Kim gives a small, predatory smile and tells the elder he's truly flattered to receive such a warm welcome. Elder Hyunhyo maintains a facade of politeness, telling Kim not to worry about the earlier incident. He notes that since this is the first time Mount Hua has hosted the Continental Bank, they simply want to show proper courtesy. Kim's gaze remains sharp, catching every subtle shift in the elder's expression. A faint, knowing smile plays on Kim's lips as he prepares his response. He plays along, praising the sect for showing such hospitality to a mere lone shark like himself during their very first meeting. Kim offers a respectful bow, claiming they truly live up to their reputation as the pillars of the Murim world. Hyunhyo watches him, his eyes narrowing as he processes Kim's words. A dark memory flashes through the elder's mind. 3 decades ago, a single man from the bank left the sect in ruins. Hyunhyo reasons that if Kim were the real deal, he would have questioned the claim that this was their first visit. But Kim just shamelessly agreed, which only deepens the elder's growing suspicions. The elder internally scoffs, labeling Kim a total fake who has no idea what he's walked into. A sinister smirk tugs at his mouth at the thought of an imposter trying to humiliate the great Mount Hua. He turns away, leading the way into the inner sanctum of the sect. With a chilling glint in his eyes, he invites them inside to continue their conversation properly. Hyunhyo isn't going to be rash like the disciple Chung Sang, but he's already planning to extract a steep price later. The grand architecture of the Mount Hua sect glows under the night sky as they head deeper inside. Sect leader Hyunjang walks through the halls, the name of the bank repeating like a curse in his mind. He can't shake the dread, wondering if the Continental Bank has truly returned to the world after all this time. He remembers how they vanished without a trace 30 years ago, leaving only a trail of blood and broken sects. In the decades since, there hadn't been a single rumor or sighting of them anywhere in the land. The silence was absolute, which makes their sudden reappearance now feel even more ominous. Hyunjang stares intensely, his mind racing with unanswered questions about the timing. The stacks of gold and the weight of the debt aren't nearly as terrifying as the bank's reputation. He stands still, his boots firmly planted as he hears the sound of approaching footsteps. He wonders if this is all just a massive coincidence or a calculated move against the sect. Hyunjang's eyes widen as the duo finally enters his sight, sweat beading on his forehead. Kim and Rihwa walk into the courtyard with a confidence that feels out of place for two outsiders. The group approaches the sect leader, who stands ready to receive them with a grim expression. Hyunjang studies Kim's face, his shock evident as he takes in the man's features. The first thing he notices is how incredibly young Kim looks compared to the monsters he remembers from the past. This man is nothing like the representatives of the Continental Bank that still haunt his nightmares. He wonders if this is a new generation of disciples or simply another elaborate fake. Hyunjang tells himself to stay calm, knowing that a single wrong move could spell disaster for everyone. Kim offers a casual greeting, introducing himself as the manager of the Continental Bank. Hyunjang returns the greeting with a formal bow, acknowledging that he's heard the entire story from his own disciple. With a sharp command, the sect leader orders his men to bring the culprit forward. Two disciples drag in a heavily beaten Chung Sang, who can barely keep his head up. The young disciple looks absolutely miserable, his face a mess of bruises and shame. Kim lets out a light-hearted laugh, commenting that their dear client doesn't seem to be looking very healthy. In the background, a guard is paralyzed with fear, unable to believe Kim survived a direct hit from his plum blossom sword art. Hyunjang's face darkens as he turns to Chung Sang, demanding to know what he thinks he's doing. The sect leader's voice booms through the courtyard, ordering the man to apologize to the guests immediately. The Mount Hua disciple who attacked earlier is completely speechless, cold sweat dripping down his face as the gravity of the situation sinks in. He trembles, unable to find the words to apologize as ordered by his leader, his pride and fear locked in a messy battle. Manager Kim waves it off with a casual, almost bored smile, saying the apology isn't necessary because the disciple's knees aren't worth that much anyway. Sect leader Hyunjang watches him, his expression unreadable as he wonders why Kim is being so dismissive of a formal apology from a martial artist. Kim's tone turns predatory as he explains that an apology isn't what they're here to receive. He makes it clear that saying, sorry, doesn't earn anyone a discount on their debt. Hyunjang's eyes flare with a mixture of deep-seated anger and growing concern for his sect. He snaps, yelling at the disciple who attacked Kim to have his meridians severed, and his dantian destroyed immediately as punishment for his arrogance. After the outburst, Hyunjang falls into a heavy silence, the weight of his own decree pressing down on the courtyard. He clears his throat, forcing himself to regain his composure before the situation spirals even further out of his control. With a stiff, shaky gesture, he invites Kim and Rihwa inside to discuss the matter in a more private, diplomatic setting. But Kim isn't interested in a polite tea session. He bluntly refuses, wanting to settle the accounts right where they stand in front of everyone. Rihwa reaches for her glasses, her demeanor shifting instantly into full, cold professional mode. She steps forward, holding her ledger and a large abacus, ready to deliver the cold, hard numbers to the shocked Taoists. Her fingers move with blurring speed across the beads, the rhythmic clicking filling the tense air like the ticking of a doomsday clock. Rihwa looks directly at the terrified Chung Sang, beginning the breakdown of his debt with the first loan he took. She reminds him that the original principal for that loan was just 500 silver nyang. Then comes the kicker. The interest accumulated on that small sum is something no one expected. Every Mount Hua member present freezes in sheer disbelief as the numbers start to climb. She reveals the interest alone on the first loan is 1,000 silver nyang, exactly twice the original amount borrowed. Moving on to the second loan, she lists a 1,000 nyang principal and 2,000 nyang in interest, adding on late fees and hazard pay for the trouble. With a sharp snap, she strikes the final bead on the abacus with chilling finality. Rihwa looks up, her eyes cold behind her glasses as she prepares to announce the grand total of the debt. Chung-sang looks like he's about to faint, the color draining completely from his face as he awaits his fate. The other disciples can only watch in horror, their world being turned upside down by these astronomical figures. Rihwa drops the bomb. The total debt comes out to a staggering 21,000 silver nyang. Chung-sang can only curse internally, finally realizing the true gravity of his greedy mistake. He tries to protest, claiming the interest is insane and the principal is somehow higher than what he actually took into his hands. The courtyard falls into a heavy, suffocating silence. For a sect that prides itself on honest poverty, that sum is absolutely world-ending. Hyunjang sweats under the pressure, but he tries to see the silver lining. If this sum is all it takes to make the bank go away, they're getting off easy. He knows that whether these two are real or fake, the Mount Hua sect cannot afford to become an enemy of the Continental Bank. However, Manager Kim stops him before he can agree, pointing out that they've left out the most crucial part of the bill. A sharp, dangerous smirk crosses his face as he mentions the price of life that hasn't been added yet. He demands compensation for the fact that Mount Hua tried to kill them the moment they arrived at the mountain gate. The air in the courtyard turns frigid as everyone realizes the stakes of this visit just tripled. Kim names his new price, 10,000 gold nyang. The sudden shift from silver to gold is a literal death sentence for the sect's finances. That single amount is more than the entire annual budget of the Mount Hua sect combined. Hyunjang's eyes go dark with a mixture of fury and despair. He realizes this isn't just a collection anymore, it's an act of war. His heart hammers against his ribs, the sound echoing in his ears as he realizes he must make a decision right now. He wonders if he should completely drain the sect's coffers just to avoid a fight, or if there's any other way out. The sound of his own racing heart is the only thing he can hear as the pressure from the bank representatives mounts. His mind returns to the nightmare of 30 years ago, seeing the absolute destruction one man from the bank caused to their home. He is jolted back to reality when Elder Hyunhyo whispers his title, snapping him out of his paralyzed trance. Elder Hyunhyo leans in close to the sect leader, his face shadowed as he whispers a radical theory about their unexpected visitors. He reminds Hyunjang of the strange behavior at the mountain gate, plants seeds of doubt that these aggressive debt collectors might not be who they claim to be. Hyunjang's eyes widen in shock as the possibility of being swindled hits him. Could they actually be fakes? Hyunhyo argues that 10,000 gold nyang is a sum they simply cannot afford, making the risk of a confrontation worth the gamble if the visitors are indeed imposters. Hyunjang remains silent, his face dripping with sweat as he weighs the two terrifying options before him. The pressure is nearly unbearable, his gaze fixed on nothing as he prepares to make a choice that will either save or doom the Mount Hua sect. Suddenly, his mouth opens, and he lets out a sharp command, ordering his disciples to form their most powerful defensive technique. At his word, the elite disciples of Mount Hua draw their blades in unison, the metallic ring of steel echoing through the courtyard. They move with practiced precision, shifting into positions that have been drilled into them since they were children. The courtyard floor seems to vibrate as the disciples plant their feet, readying themselves for an all-out assault. They surround Manager Kim and Mak Rihwa, closing the circle and cutting off any possible avenue of escape. A powerful, pink-hued aura begins to radiate from the lead disciple, the air around him shimmering with the intensity of his internal energy. Mak Rihwa looks on in genuine surprise, her professional mask slipping for a brief second as she realizes the situation has turned violent. Her eyes lock onto a specific detail, the red threads hanging from the sword hilts of the disciples. She realizes with a start that every single one of these men belongs to the elite, red plum blossom rank of the sect's military force. The formation is fully active now, the entire area engulfed in a swirling vortex of energy and falling plum blossom petals. Hyunjang watches from the side, a look of grim determination on his face as the formation takes its final shape. He laments the fact that his strongest, white plum blossom masters are away, but he believes this force should still be enough to handle any impostor. The legendary plum blossom swordsmen are known throughout the Murim as Mount Hua's greatest military strength. These elite warriors are strictly divided into 3 ranks based on their mastery: blue, red, and finally, the peerless white. Among them, the white plum blossoms are absolute masters of the sword, individuals whose names alone command respect in the martial world. It is a frustrating turn of events for Hyunjang to face a possible threat from the Continental Bank without his top-tier experts. The courtyard is transformed into a literal storm of lethal energy, the pink blossoms masking the deadly intent within. Manager Kim stands at the center of the hurricane, his back to the viewer, seemingly unfazed as the chapter comes to a dramatic, petal-filled close. Manager Kim just lets out a dry chuckle. He warns them that at this rate, the bill is only going to get higher. Elder Hyunhyo screams for the attack, boasting that even the legendary heavenly demon once had to retreat from this formation. The red plum blossom disciples surge forward, their blades glowing with pink energy. They launch the first form of the plum blossom sword formation, a move designed to pin down any master. Surrounded by a storm of petals, Kim just keeps that same predatory smirk on his face. A massive explosion of energy erupts right where he's standing. Energy petals swirl violently through the air as the strike connects. But instead of Kim falling, the disciples are the ones sent flying backwards, hacking up blood. In an instant, bodies are scattered across the entire courtyard. Sect leader Hyunjang watches in pure shock as his elites are easily dismantled. Hyunhyo can only stare with his mouth wide open, completely paralyzed by what he's seeing. He keeps telling himself that this should be impossible. This formation was Mount Hua's pride, built specifically to stop absolute monsters. The realization finally hits the elder like a ton of bricks. Manager Kim isn't just a collector, he's on a completely different level. A massive, demonic shadow begins to tower over the battlefield. Panicking, the elder yells for everyone to get back up and reform the line. He knows that if they let this man leave alive, Mount Hua has no future. The remaining disciples scramble to attack again, throwing everything they have at him. Kim doesn't even flinch as they approach. He calmly informs his dear clients that since they chose to resist, he's adding a premium surcharge to the debt. Hyunhyo realized he was dealing with a monster. Sweat dripped down his face as he stared at the man standing in the courtyard. Manager Kim stood tall, his shadow stretching across the ground like a literal demon. The battlefield was a mess. Hyunhyo screamed at the fallen disciples to get up and reform their formation. He knew they were dead if they let this guy walk out of here alive. The disciples lunged at Kim with everything they had, shouting that Mount Hua wouldn't go down without a fight. Kim didn't even flinch. He just watched them with a calm, almost bored smirk. He told them they were valued customers, but things were about to get expensive. A surcharge was officially being applied to their bill from this point on. Riwa pulled out her abacus and started crunching the numbers. She asked how much they were actually aiming to collect. Between the principal and the interest, it was already a massive sum. Kim turned to her, calling her name. He asked her a dark question. How much did she think a human life was actually worth? He figured 100,000 gold coins, for the attempted murder seemed fair enough. Riwa was stunned. You could literally buy an entire sect with that kind of cash. Kim tapped his chin and offered a generous discount, dropping the price to 10,000 gold. She realized he was playing them. He knew from the start they couldn't pay, so he had a different target in mind. Riwa pointed out the obvious. Even if they had that much money, they'd never just hand it over. Kim just laughed. If they didn't pay, he'd just take what he wanted anyway. She looked at him with genuine worry, wondering what his plan really was. Was he planning to drain their internal chi like he did to Wijichin? If he did that, he'd become the public enemy of the entire martial world. Kim paused and asked if she knew what Mount Hua's most valuable asset actually was. It wasn't their gold, and it wasn't even their martial arts. He said it was the sheer amount of time they had accumulated. Something that defied all common sense. A massive tornado of petals and energy erupted in the middle of the courtyard. The disciples unleashed the Plum Blossom Wild Dance, the second form of their legendary sword formation. The lead swordsman thrust his blade forward, but Kim vanished from his sight. A huge blast of energy tore through the ground, where the manager had been standing just a second ago. The courtyard was getting absolutely wrecked by the intensity of the technique. A giant plum blossom shape made of pure energy exploded against the stone tiles. Kim was just a blur of motion, weaving through the storm of petals. He leaped over a horizontal slash, looking completely untouched. The disciples kept swinging, their blades leaving trails of light in the air as they tried to pin him down. They surrounded him, hitting the ground with enough force to shatter the entire courtyard. The energy formed a massive, swirling vortex of red and pink. Debris and roof tiles flew everywhere as the formation reached its peak. The sect leader watched the chaos with his jaw dropped. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Kim was dodging their ultimate move like it was child's play. Panicking, the sect leader ordered every remaining swordsman to jump in and fight. They had to buy time until the formation was fully complete. A whole group of disciples charged forward with a collective battle cry. Manager Kim just sighed, looking over his shoulder at the incoming wave of fodder. A slow, heavy step echoed through the courtyard. Debris and disciples were sent flying, as the ground itself buckled under the sheer pressure of Kim's presence. Rocks and bodies were tossed into the air like they were weightless. The surviving disciples could only watch in horror, their faces twisted in disbelief as their world literally fell apart. Manager Kim stood at the center of the carnage, his hands casually tucked behind his back as if he were just out for a stroll. He wore a chilling smirk, clearly enjoying the chaos he'd unleashed on the legendary sect. He raised a hand, and the air itself seemed to condense around his palm. A massive wave of force as he strikes a rock, sending it flying toward the disciples like a fired cannonball. Despite the obvious danger, more disciples charged forward, fueled by pure desperation. One man screamed with every ounce of courage he had left, refusing to back down. But courage didn't matter when his face was met with a chilling strike from Manager Kim's attack. His teeth were sent flying along with his consciousness as he was hammered into the dirt. He landed hard, another victim of a fight he never stood a chance of winning. Kim stood tall in the middle of a fresh crater, looking like a god of destruction relentlessly firing cannon shots. Anyone who got too close was instantly blown away by the projectiles he fired. Makriwa watched the slaughter from a distance, her expression as calm as a still lake. She didn't look bothered at all. For her, this was just another day at the office. She stepped over the groaning bodies of the fallen, her focus solely on her manager. Kim noted that Mount Hua had truly fallen from grace, throwing these green disciples into what was essentially a meat grinder. Suddenly, his eyes narrowed as a massive spike of energy caught his attention. The sky was set ablaze by a giant plum blossom made of pink energy, the third form of the sect's legendary formation. Instead of being worried, Kim just grinned. This was the main course he'd been waiting for. He reached out his hand, and the surrounding energy began to spiral towards his palm. A blade of pure golden light materialized in his grip, burning with an intense heat. He tightened his hold on the hilt as the energy stabilized into a solid weapon. Kim stood ready, wielding a sword of light that made him look like a holy warrior. The Mount Hua sect leader's jaw dropped as he witnessed the impossible. He couldn't wrap his head around how a man could stop their ultimate sword force with his bare hands. Kim moved with blinding speed, a trail of petals following his every turn. He let out a single, horizontal slash that cut through the air itself. Two massive pillars of energy were cleaved in half by the sheer force of his strike. The elders and the sect leader could only stare in stunned silence, their proudest technique broken in an instant. The remaining disciples were paralyzed with fear, their spirits finally crushed. A massive explosion of petals and light engulfed the entire area as the formation collapsed. Silence returned to the courtyard, punctuated only by the soft sound of petals drifting to the ground. Kim stood unscathed in the center of the ruins, his light blade still glowing softly. He stood over the wreckage of the courtyard, a lone figure in a sea of defeat. He paused, his own heart thumping against his chest from the thrill of the clash. The temple grounds were a graveyard of broken swords and unconscious men. Those who were still awake could do nothing but cough up blood and wonder what just hit them. The sect leader stood alone, his robes tattered and his pride completely destroyed. He looked at his fallen men, barely able to mutter the words that their legendary formation had been shattered. The Mount Hua sect leader was drenched in cold sweat, his heart hammering against his ribs as he felt the overwhelming pressure of Kim's internal energy. Manager Kim stood amidst the settling dust, a golden aura radiating from him like a predator marking its territory. He began walking calmly across the shattered tiles, suggesting that they could finally have a proper conversation now that the distractions were dealt with. The old sect leader flinched as Kim stopped just inches from him, the sheer weight of his presence making it hard to breathe. With a sharp, predatory smirk, Kim asked if they should finally begin the settlement for their valued customer. The sect leader could only stare in silence, his face pale and his mind reeling from the sudden shift from battle to business. His eyes were wide with a mix of terror and realization as he looked into the cold, golden eyes of the manager. His jaw tightened, the weight of his responsibility as leader crashing down on him in the wake of this defeat. He began to doubt everything, wondering if he had made a catastrophic error by choosing to fight instead of negotiate. Kim and Manhwa stood side by side, two silent figures of authority looming over the remains of Mount Hua's pride. The sect leader thought back to Chengsang, wondering if simply handing the boy over would have saved them from this humiliation. He looked out at his fallen disciples and wondered if a different choice would have spared them all this pain. Kim's expression remained neutral, his gaze fixed on the old man as if he were looking at a ledger rather than a person. He conceded that perhaps things might have been different, but he knew the nature of the sect better than they did. He noted that Mount Hua would never have surrendered without a fight, just like 30 years ago. The sect leader was speechless, the mention of their past failures striking a chord deep within his soul. Grim memories of blood and loss flashed through his mind, the parallels to their current situation becoming painfully clear. He finally realized the terrifying depth of the man standing before him. It wasn't just a random encounter. Kim had planned this entire scenario from the very beginning. Lending money to a low-level disciple like Chengsang was just the bait to bury the entire sect in debt. It was a calculated excuse to force his way onto Mount Hua and settle old scores. Manhwa stood by, her presence a constant reminder of the bank's cold, bureaucratic ruthlessness. Every event had been a stepping stone to back Mount Hua into a corner, leaving them with no choice but to draw their swords. The sect leader let out a hollow laugh, a sound of pure defeat as he realized the trap had been perfect. He saw now that there was never a right choice for them. The outcome was decided before they even knew the game had started. He asked Kim why he bothered with such a complex scheme when someone with his power could have just taken whatever he wanted by force. Manager Kim remained impassive, his silence only adding to his enigmatic aura. His gaze was steady, as if he were contemplating a profound truth about the nature of power. He explained that while the martial world is often ruled by the law of the jungle, simple plunder wasn't his way. He admitted that he could have easily broken through their gates and taken their heads if he wished. With his martial prowess, no one on Mount Hua could have possibly stood in his way. But Kim chose not to act as a common conqueror. Instead, he meticulously established a debt and a justification, forcing them to be the ones to initiate the conflict. He argued that if the strong simply plundered the weak without cause, the world would lose its order. He warned that a world without such rules would soon be filled with nothing but the size and suffering of the common people. The sect leader looked up in surprise, caught off guard by Kim's seemingly moral stance. But Kim suddenly burst into laughter, declaring that taking things by force was for highway robbers, not the professional Continental Bank. The old man could only seethe in silence, thinking that Kim's professionalism was just a more polite form of thuggery. Kim turned to his assistant and told her to recalculate the debt with all the new surcharges applied. Manhwa immediately began working her abacus, the rapid clicking sound echoing through the quiet courtyard. The sect leader could only watch in despair, as his sect's financial ruin was calculated with cold, mechanical precision. He realized that since they had drawn their swords and lost, the price they had to pay would now be unimaginably high. Manhwa adjusted her glasses, her voice flat and professional as she announced the staggering total of 50,000 gold coins. The elders of the Mount Hua sect were left paralyzed by the figure, their faces twisted in a mixture of disbelief and pure terror. The Mount Hua sect leader stammered, his voice trembling as he pleaded that such a sum was far beyond the sect's current means. Manager Kim gave a mockingly understanding smile, nodding that he had anticipated the difficulty of a single lump sum payment. He spoke of the two options usually offered to valued customers who found themselves in such a predicament, his tone light and conversational. His smile widened into a terrifying, toothy grin as he presented the first option, paying with your body. Kim clarified with chilling precision that he meant harvesting the internal chi of every swordsman who had drawn a blade against him. The defeated disciples on the ground could only listen in horror, realizing the true price of their failed assault. Manager Kim then presented the second option, handing over a treasure of equal value from the sect's vaults. The sect leader's mind immediately went to their most sacred manuals, terrified that the bank was after the heart of their martial heritage. With a tired sigh, Kim dismissed the idea, stating that possessing secret manuals only brought unwanted trouble and rumors. He turned to his assistant, asking her to reveal the final page of the ledger, leaving the sect leader in a state of anxious confusion. Manhwa held up the ledger, her expression unreadable as she displayed a specific illustration to the old man. The sect leader's eye bulged in absolute shock, a cold dread washing over him as he recognized the item on the page. The illustration was clear. They were looking at the Jew family yellow dragon sword. The old man could barely stammer out the name of the sword, but Kim saw right through his attempts to play dumb. Kim's eyes became sharp and predatory as he mentioned the imperial blade received 30 years ago as payment for that incident. The sect leader was completely undone, his heart racing as he wondered how this man could possibly know such a deep, dark secret. Leaning in with a confident smirk, Kim framed the trade of the single sword as a generous bargain for the sect. In a desperate panic, the sect leader offered his own token and their most secret arts, anything to keep from losing the yellow dragon sword. He pleaded with every fiber of his being, his dignity completely gone as he begged for any other alternative. He knew that surrendering such a symbol would strip Mount Hua of its standing and respect in the entire martial world. Manager Kim stood tall and unmoved, declaring that this was his final offer and that the time for negotiation was over. The two sides stood in a tense, silent standoff, the fate of Mount Hua's legacy hanging on the sect leader's impossible choice. The old man stands in silence, his face worn with exhaustion. He looks out over the courtyard, a shadow of the leader he used to be. He realizes that from the very beginning, this was exactly what Manager Kim was after. He calls out for Hyunhyo, ready to surrender the one thing they have left. The sect is in ruins, its pride shattered along with its buildings. A voice echoes through the wreckage, demanding the yellow dragon sword. Under the moonlight, the sect leader presents the heirloom. Manager Kim and Manhwa wait to receive it. A sharp ring cuts the air as the blade is pulled from its sheath. Manager Kim stares at the weapon, his gaze fixed on the treasure. The sword hums with power, glowing with a divine light. Kim examines the blade, clearly impressed by the quality of the prize. Then the terrifying collector breaks into a huge, blushing smile. He looks like a kid with a new toy. With the debt settled, Kim and Rihwa bow and thank their valued customer for the payment. Kim hands over a business card, introducing himself one last time. He's practically beaming as he says he looks forward to their next transaction. Behind them, the gate of the Mount Hua sect lies in total rubble. The sect leader stands before his disciples, centuries of tradition gone in a single night. He stares at the small card in his hand, a mocking reminder of their defeat. He delivers the final command: the Mount Hua sect will seal its gates. The disciples are frozen in shock, unable to process the news. For the next 10 years, the sect will be locked away from the world, completely cut off from the martial world. The younger students can't hide their despair. One disciple breaks down, tears streaming down his face as the reality sets in. Even the sect leader weeps openly under the pale sky. Plum blossoms drift through the empty air, signaling the end of an era. He looks down at the card one last time, the name manager Kim etched into his memory. The season of the plum blossoms has ended. For them, it's going to be a long, cold decade. Petals fall into the darkness. Like the saying goes, no flower stays red for 10 days. Mount Hua's time has run out. The city is alive under the night sky, with lanterns lighting up the busy streets. Inside a bustling entertainment house, the music starts up. A performer sits on stage, her fingers dancing across the lute strings. At the tables, the patrons are already deep in their cups and laughing loudly. The wine is flowing as the guys call for another round of drinks. Tucked away in a corner, Baek Il-myung sits alone at a quiet table. One of the entertainers notices him and glides over with a smile. She leans in close, offering to pour him a drink. He gives a small nod and accepts her offer, panel number 8, row ID. She fills his cup, but her eyes suggest she's there for more than just hospitality. She leans into his ear and whispers the news: Mount Hua has officially shut its gates. Baek's eyes widen as the realization hits him. He can't believe it, a total sect closure for 10 years. She confirms the details. The disciples are forbidden from leaving and the mountain is completely sealed off. She asks if they should deploy more people to find out the truth. Baek Il-myung, the leader of the Hao sect, stares into his cup with a grim expression. He knows exactly what this means for the martial world. A major power like Mount Hua giving up its influence is an event with unknown details. The spy suggests they could win over merchant groups to dig up the truth. But Baek shuts her down immediately. He wants all info on the incident erased. She's confused why he'd walk away from such profitable information. He tells her straight up that some things are a lot more terrifying than money. He dismisses her, leaving no room for further questions. She bows respectfully and prepares to take her leave. As she walks away, the room feels a lot heavier. Baek is breaking out in a cold sweat. He calls the person responsible a crazy bastard. Forcing a legendary sect into total hiding was a move he didn't think actually happened. He sets his cup down, his mind racing with old memories. His gaze falls on his own arm, where a jagged bone-like scar stands out. Even as a brilliant leader, he made exactly one massive mistake in his past. He remembers the night he crossed paths with the wrong man. Manager Kim had grabbed him with a grip that left a mark on his soul. That encounter left him with a permanent scar and a lesson he'd never forget. He realized then that there was an existence he should have never opposed. He exhales, wondering if it's finally time to pay him a visit. He's dying to know how Kim managed to pull off the Mount Hua stunt. Meanwhile, across town, Mak Rihwa is enjoying a much-needed break at a tea house. She's got a fresh pot of tea and a plate of snacks all to herself. It's a rare moment of peace for the bank's assistant. She leans back, finally having a peaceful day for once. But thinking about the demonic cult and Mount Hua, she knows things have been exhausting. Mak Rihwa enjoys a quiet moment, thinking about the manager being away on business for the morning. It's the first time she's been able to actually relax and enjoy the tea after so much chaos. Her peace is short-lived, as the sound of footsteps echoes through the tea house. A group of men stroll in, led by a guy who clearly thinks he owns the place. He walks right up to her with a sleazy grin, asking if a beautiful lady like her isn't bored sitting all alone. Riwa doesn't even look up, her snacks and tea far more interesting than his arrival. When she finally turns to face him, the man is momentarily stunned by her looks. Hyuk So-seong is used to getting whatever he wants, so her confused expression is a bit of a shock. Up close, he decides she's even more stunning than he initially thought. He asks her to keep them company, but she shuts him down without a second thought. His lackey steps in, offended that she doesn't recognize his great master. He boasts that this is the eldest young master of the Hyuk clan, the group that rules this entire region. Riwa couldn't care less about his family name and tells them to back off. Hyuk So-seong finds her defiance interesting and refuses to leave. He's never been treated this way by a woman in this region before. His ego is clearly bruised and his expression turns dark. He slams his hand on the table, trying to use his presence to intimidate her. He leans in close, telling her she's going to keep him company today whether she likes it or not. Suddenly, a hand grabs his wrist with a bone-crushing grip. Hyuk So-seong screams in agony as he's forced to his knees by the pressure. A voice tells him the lady already said she's not interested, so he should listen. His lackeys are terrified, wondering who this stranger is that's manhandling their master. Baek Il-myung doesn't let go, asking if this is really the eldest young master of the clan. He mocks the Hyuk clan as a minor local family whose head can barely hit first-class level. Hyuk So-seong realizes he's dealing with someone way out of his league. He breaks into a cold sweat, suspecting a powerful backing behind this man's boldness. He decides to cut his losses and bolts out of the tea house with his lackeys behind him. With the trash gone, Baek Il-myung casually walks over and takes a seat at her table. He greets her as Lady Makri, acting like they've known each other for years. Riwa is on guard immediately, having no clue who this man is. He laughs it off, admitting he's done a lot of research on her recently. Riwa starts to worry, especially since the manager isn't around to help. He starts listing off her background, identifying her as the second daughter of the Makri clan. He knows she joined the Continental Bank a year ago and is sharp-witted with numbers. He even knows about their recent travels, saddling martial artists with private loans, including the debt collected from the Heavenly Demon and the forced closure of Mount Hua. He claims to know everything about her life, right down to how many meals she's eaten. Disturbed by the depth of his knowledge, she demands to know who he actually is. He drops the bombshell, he's the leader of the Hao sect. Riwa realizes she's sitting across from the man who controls the largest info network in the land. She asks the obvious question, what does someone like him want from her? He just takes a bite of a snack and casually tells her he wants absolutely nothing. Riwa isn't buying it for a second, a man of his stature following her for nothing. She calls him out, pointing out that he tracked her every move just to show up right in front of her. Baek Il-myung looks like he's about to burst, finding her suspicion absolutely hilarious. He breaks out into a massive laugh that fills the whole tea house, leaving Riwa even more confused. Finally, he lets her in on the truth. He's actually an employee of the Continental Bank, too. He calls himself her senior, which sends Riwa into a complete state of shock. Panel number 5, row ID. Her mind is spinning. She can't wrap her head around what she just heard. The literal leader of the Hao sect is a member of the bank. It sounds like a bad joke. Baek Il-myung gets a real kick out of her priceless face as he snacks on some pastries. Riwa quickly connects the dots, asking if all the background info they get on their marks comes from him. He confirms it with a smirk, admitting he's the source for all their client information. She asks if that includes the recent mess with the Mount Hua sect case as well. Baek Il-myung explains that his real job is scouting for clients who are desperate for cash. He finds out who's broke and who has the specific items Manager Kim is looking for. Everything finally makes sense for Riwa. No wonder the manager always seems to find clients so easily. He knew exactly who was desperate and who had a gambling problem to exploit. Baek Il-myung continues, showing just how deep his information network really goes. He mentions even the smallest details that have passed through his hands. He even brings up her own clan's fall, mentioning how they were ruined by foolish ambition. Manhwa falls silent, the mention of her past clearly hitting a nerve. Sensing the mood, Baek Il-myung pivots, offering to answer any other questions she might have. Since she's his cute junior, he's feeling generous with the secrets today. Rihwa starts wondering what manager Kim's true identity actually is. She's hesitant, knowing the manager isn't the type to ever talk about himself. But then she realizes this might be her only chance to get a straight answer. She gathers her courage and asks the sect leader point-blank what he knows about the manager. She wants to know how he's so strong and why he's even doing this debt collection work. Baek Il-myung sighs, telling her she really is in the dark about the man she works for. He leans in close, asking if she really wants to know a secret about manager Kim. Manhwa is all ears, leaning in to catch every word he's about to say. Baek Il-myung is just about to whisper it when he suddenly freezes up. A shadow falls over the table, and Baek Il-myung starts sweating like he's seen a ghost. His mouth snaps shut instantly, the secret dying before it can even be spoken. The playful smirk is completely gone, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated dread. Manager Kim has appeared right behind them, greeting them with his usual calm demeanor. Baek Il-myung jumps up, acting like a kid who just got caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Manager Kim teases him, asking why he's taking such a keen interest in his employee. Baek Il-myung lets out a forced, nervous laugh, trying to play it off as simple professional curiosity. He tries to claim that earning the manager's recognition is more important than any salary. Manager Kim isn't really listening to his excuses, his eyes fixed on their next move. He calls him sect leader Baek, and notes that people will start moving now that Manhwa is gone. Baek Il-myung quickly gets back to business, confirming they are suppressing all the rumors for now. Manager Kim's command is simple yet baffling. Don't cover them up. Baek Il-myung can't believe his ears. Instead of hiding the truth, the manager wants the news of Manhwa's destruction spread far and wide. Baek Il-myung knows that the fall of such a major sect will send shockwaves through the entire martial world, leaving everyone desperate for answers. He worries that things will get incredibly troublesome if the word gets out, yet he's being ordered to do exactly that. A sudden thought crosses Baek Il-myung's mind, a realization of the sheer scale of the manager's plan. He lets out a loud, hollow laugh that rings through the quiet room as he finally understands the play. "You are truly terrifying," he exclaims, asking how the manager manages to get even scarier by the day. The compliment is delivered like a joke, but it's heavily laced with a mixture of genuine fear and deep-seated admiration. Baek Il-myung realizes that the manager isn't just spreading rumors. He's setting a trap, using Manhwa as bait for a much bigger catch. It's a strategy that only someone with absolute, unshakable confidence in their own strength could ever devise. Baek Il-myung has seen many powerful people, but he knows manager Kim has every right to possess that kind of confidence. He swallows hard, the certainty of the manager's inevitable victory sinking in. Looking at the man sitting so calmly before him, Baek Il-myung finally understands the true ambition of the Continental Bank. This man doesn't just want to collect from one sect, he intends to collect a debt from the entire martial world.